The soft glow of a computer monitor is the only light in the office, painting long shadows that stretch like accusations across the empty desks. In one chair sits Jacob, a man carved from stillness and silence, staring at the words on the screen. It is a rejection, polite and final, for a position he once called a dream. But it is not the rejection itself that holds him captive in the late hours. It is the ghosts of choices that have risen to haunt him. The ghosts of the degree he didn't pursue, the city he didn't move to, the risk he didn't take. His mind is a courtroom where he is both prosecutor and defendant, replaying the closing arguments of a life he believes has gone wrong. He whispers into the quiet room, a mantra of regret. I should have, I shouldn't have. Each phrase is a heavy stone, added to a pile he has been carrying for years. This scene, in this lonely office, is a quiet echo of a noise that fills our modern world. We live in an age of infinite doors, a seemingly endless corridor of possibilities for our careers, our relationships, our very identities. We are told that freedom is the power to choose, but we are haunted by the terror of choosing incorrectly. The pressure to find the one, single, correct path through this labyrinth creates a low, constant hum of anxiety. We scroll through the curated lives of others, each image a potential reminder of a door we didn't open, a life we aren't living. We suffer from a kind of spiritual paralysis, weighed down by the ghost of the life that could have been, a life we imagine would have been free of the struggles and disappointments of our own. We are convinced that somewhere in the past, we took a wrong turn and have been lost ever since. But what if this entire premise is flawed? What if there are no wrong turns, only different roads? What if every path, especially the ones filled with stones and shadowed valleys, is the exact path we needed to walk? What if the map we were given was never about right and wrong answers, but about the journey itself? There is an ancient stream of wisdom, a philosophy born from deep observation of the human mind, that looks upon this struggle with immense compassion. It does not offer easy answers or a way to turn back time. Instead, it offers a radical reframing. It suggests that our deepest peace is found not in making the perfect choice, but in fully embracing the choices we have already made. This is an invitation to look at the concepts of destiny, of choice, and of error, not as we have been taught, but through the clear, illuminating lens of Buddhist thought, and to begin the quiet work of putting down the stones of our regret, one by one. Regret is an echo. It is a sound that begins with a single event in the past, but reverberates through all the chambers of the present. It is a ghost that requires no darkness to appear, walking beside us in the brightest daylight. It is the texture of our thoughts, the unwelcome guest at every quiet meal. We know its language intimately. The two most sorrowful phrases in any tongue, what if and if only. These are the incantations that summon the past, not as it was, but as a distorted, idealized version of what it might have been. This act of mental time travel is not a journey of curiosity, but one of self-flagellation. We return to the scene of the choice, the fork in the road, the moment the words were spoken, and we force ourselves to watch a different movie, a movie where we are smarter, braver, more prescient, and in the dark theater of our own minds, we torture ourselves with the beauty of a film that was never made. This is the fundamental nature of regret. It is a profound and painful resistance to reality. It is the mind's refusal to accept what has already happened. The past is an immutable landscape, carved in stone, yet we stand before it with a tiny hammer, chipping away in the futile hope of changing its shape, exhausting ourselves in the process. This prison of what-ifs is built on a foundation of two powerful illusions. The first is our deep attachment to a non-existent, perfect outcome. When we regret a choice, we are not simply wishing for a different past. We are mourning the loss of a specific, imaginary future we believe that different choice would have unlocked. If only I had taken that job, we think, I would be wealthy and fulfilled. If only I had not ended that relationship, I would be happy and loved. But this fantasized future is a complete fiction. It is a story we tell ourselves, selectively edited to include all the triumphs and none of the potential hardships. We imagine the alternate path as a smooth, sunlit road, conveniently forgetting that it too would have had its own potholes, its own unexpected storms, its own moments of doubt and difficulty. We are not grieving a reality we lost. We are grieving a daydream we created. The second illusion, which props up the first, is the ego's belief in its own supreme control. Regret is the cry of an ego that has been humbled by the unpredictable chaos of life. It whispers to us that we should have known better, that we could have controlled the variables, that the failure was a personal one, a flaw in our character or intellect. This perspective ignores the profound truth of our existence, that every single choice is the result of a near infinite confluence of conditions. Our decision on that day was shaped by our mood, the quality of our sleep the night before, a passing comment from a friend, the news we read in the morning, the subtle pressures of our culture and upbringing. To believe we could have simply willed a different outcome, ignoring this vast web of causes and effects, is an act of profound arrogance. Regret, then, is the suffering that arises when the ego's illusion of control collides with the unchangeable reality of the past. There is a teaching story from the Zen tradition that illuminates this process with perfect clarity. Two monks, one old and one young, were on a long journey on foot. They came to a river where the recent rains had washed away the bridge, leaving a wide, muddy torrent of water. On the bank stood a young, beautifully dressed woman, wringing her hands in distress, unable to cross. The monks had taken strict vows, one of which was to avoid all physical contact with women. The younger monk, rigid in his observance, immediately looked away, preparing to wade across the river alone. But the older monk, seeing the woman's predicament, simply walked over to her, bent down, and lifted her onto his shoulders. He carried her carefully through the rushing water and set her down gently on the other side. She thanked him profusely, and he simply nodded and continued on his way. The younger monk was speechless. He hurried to catch up, his mind a storm of judgment and confusion. For the next several hours, as they walked in silence, he seethed. How could his master have so flagrantly broken such a sacred vow? The act replayed in his mind again and again. He imagined the criticism they would face, the stain on their reputation. His own sense of piety felt insulted. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he burst out, "Master, how could you do that? We have taken vows not to touch a woman, yet you lifted one onto your shoulders and carried her." The old monk stopped walking, turned to his young companion, and a gentle, compassionate smile touched his lips. He looked at the agitated young man and said softly, "I left that woman by the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story is a perfect mirror for the mind caught in regret. The woman at the river is the event in the past. She is the difficult choice, the awkward situation, the perceived mistake. Crossing the river was the action required in that moment. The older monk represents wisdom in action. He saw a problem, responded with simple, unattached compassion, and once the action was complete, it was over. He did not carry the memory of it, the justification for it, or the meaning of it with him. His mind was as clear as it was before he saw her. The younger monk, however, is the ordinary mind, our mind. He did not carry the woman physically, but he picked her up mentally and refused to put her down. He carried the weight of his judgment, his analysis, his indignation, and his story about the event for hours, long after the event itself had vanished into the past. His suffering was entirely self-created. He was not being harmed by the past event, but by his own refusal to let it go. We are all this young monk. We carry the ghosts of our past decisions, our failed relationships, our career missteps, on our shoulders every single day. We allow them to weigh us down, to sour our present mood, to cloud our view of the path ahead. The wisdom of Buddhism asks us the same question the old monk asked: why are you still carrying this? From this perspective, regret is seen as a quintessential form of what is called dukkha. This ancient word is often translated as suffering, but its meaning is deeper, more subtle. It is the inherent unsatisfactoriness, the stress, the friction we experience when we fight against the nature of reality. Regret is a prime example of dukkha that we manufacture ourselves. It is a poison we willingly drink, a fire we feed with our own thoughts. It has no power to alter the past. Its only function is to contaminate the present. When we are lost in regret, we are not truly living in the now. Our senses are dulled. Our heart is closed. We cannot fully see the person in front of us, taste the food we are eating, or feel the sun on our skin, because a significant portion of our energy is being spent in a non-existent past. We are choosing a memory over the vitality of the only moment that ever truly exists, this one. The path to freedom from this particular prison begins with the simple, courageous recognition of what we are doing. It begins with noticing the weight on our shoulders and asking ourselves, with genuine curiosity and compassion, what is it I am still carrying? Understanding the burden of regret, seeing it for the self-made ghost that it is the first crucial step. But this obsession with past mistakes is often propped up by an even deeper, more foundational belief, the very one that paralyzes us in the face of life's choices. The illusion that there is a single, correct path to begin with, and that we have somehow strayed from it. Before we can truly put down the past, we must first challenge our entire map of the future. From the moment we can understand language, we are handed invisible maps. These maps are not of countries or continents, but of a territory far more intimate and treacherous, a successful life. They are drawn by the loving but anxious hands of our parents, sketched out by the rigid lines of our education system, and colored in with the impossibly vibrant hues of media and culture. The landmarks on this map are deeply familiar to us all. First, there is the straight road of schooling, leading to the high peak of a prestigious university. From there, the path continues onto a plateau of a stable, respectable career, a ladder we are meant to climb steadily and without deviation. Along the way are the designated resting spots of marriage, home ownership, and children, all laid out in a neat, predictable sequence. This is the official cartography of happiness, the accepted route to a life well lived. We are taught to navigate by this map, to measure our progress by its milestones, and to feel a sense of unease and failure whenever our own journey seems to diverge from its well-trodden ways. The problem, of course, is that this map is a fiction. It is a generic template imposed upon the wild, unique, and unpredictable landscape of an individual human life. This societal programming, often delivered with the best of intentions, becomes a source of profound inner conflict. It creates a powerful tension between the life we are told we should want and the life our own heart, our own strange and wonderful nature, is quietly calling us to live. A young person with a passion for art may feel the immense pressure to pursue a more practical career in business. A person who finds deep contentment in simplicity may feel the constant push to accumulate more wealth and possessions. Someone who thrives in solitude may be made to feel flawed for not being more social and outgoing. When our inner compass points north, but the map in our hands insists the correct direction is east, the result is a chronic feeling of being lost, of being fundamentally wrong. We begin to believe that the flaw lies not in the map, but in ourselves. This internal dissonance is the breeding ground for anxiety, for the quiet desperation of a life lived out of alignment with one's own truth. In our modern age, this pressure has been magnified to an almost unbearable degree by the hall of mirrors we call social media. Here, it is not just one map we are given, but millions of them, all seemingly perfect, all leading to lives of effortless joy and spectacular achievement. We scroll through a curated reality, an endless feed of promotions, exotic vacations, beautiful weddings, and happy families, all filtered and presented without context. We are engaged in a constant, subconscious act of comparison, measuring our own messy, complicated, behind-the-scenes reality against the public highlight reels of countless others. This is a game that is impossible to win, a mechanism perfectly designed to produce feelings of inadequacy. The quiet anxieties that were once confined to our own private thoughts are now amplified and validated at every turn. We see a former classmate's career success and feel a pang of jealousy, interpreting it as evidence of our own failure. We see a friend's travel photos and feel our own life is mundane and small. The digital world superimposes a million correct paths over our own, each one making our personal journey seem less valid, less significant. We feel we are perpetually falling behind in a race, without ever stopping to question who drew the finish line or why we are running at all. Now, let us step away from this noise. Let us imagine, for a moment, walking into a silent, ancient forest. In this forest, two particular forms of life stand out. First, there is a magnificent old oak tree. Its trunk is thick and gnarled, a testament to the centuries it has weathered. Its roots run deep into the earth, holding it fast against the strongest gales. It is a symbol of strength, of stability, of endurance. Its purpose is expressed in its unyielding solidity. Not far away stands a grove of bamboo. The stalks are slender, green, and elegant. When the wind blows, the bamboo does not resist. It yields, it bends, sometimes almost to the ground, but it does not break. When the wind passes, it springs back, unharmed and graceful. Its purpose is expressed in its resilience, its flexibility. Now, consider this question. Does the mighty oak look upon the bamboo with envy, wishing it could dance and sway in the breeze? Does the bamboo feel inadequate because it does not have the massive, unshakable trunk of the oak? The question itself is absurd. It is nonsensical. The oak is not a failed bamboo. The bamboo is not a failed oak. Each is a perfect, complete, and beautiful expression of its own inherent nature. Each fulfills its role in the ecosystem of the forest by being exactly what it is. Their value does not come from comparing themselves to one another, but from their authentic embodiment of their own unique qualities. This, right here, is the heart of the Buddhist understanding of a life path. It is the profound and liberating realization that we are not all meant to follow the same map. Some of us are oaks, meant to create stability, to put down deep roots, and to provide shelter for others. Some of us are bamboos, meant to be flexible, to adapt to changing circumstances, and to find strength in yielding. And many of us are other things entirely. The quiet moss, the flowering vine, the hidden mushroom, the suffering, the feeling of being on the wrong path, arises not from our nature, but from our judgment of it. It comes from being a bamboo and berating ourselves daily for not being an oak. The entire spiritual journey, from this perspective, is not about becoming something different. It is not about forcing ourselves to fit a pre-existing mold. It is a journey of radical self-discovery and self-acceptance. It is the process of learning to appreciate our own oakness or bamboo-ness. The Buddhist teachings gently guide us to turn our attention inward, to observe the patterns of our own mind and heart, and to discover what is authentically true for us, separate from the noise of societal expectation and comparison. Comparison, in this light, is seen as the thief of joy and the root of so much unnecessary suffering. The moment we compare our path to another's, we have created a hierarchy of value, and in that hierarchy, we will almost always place ourselves on a lower rung. This act of self-diminishment is a subtle form of violence against our own spirit. The only valid comparison is with who we were yesterday, and even that should be held lightly. The invitation is to lay down, once and for all, the generic, mass-produced maps we have been handed. It is to begin the brave work of exploring our own inner territory, of learning to trust the guidance of our own internal compass. Your life, with all its unique detours, its unexpected valleys, and its surprising clearings, is not a mistake. It is not a deviation from the norm. It is the path. It is the only path you could ever be on. Your curriculum is your own experience. The task is not to find a better map, but to learn to walk your own ground with awareness, with kindness, and with a deep, trusting acceptance that the journey itself is the destination. But if our life's direction is not determined by a pre-written map of right and wrong, then what are the forces that guide its unfolding? This question leads us directly to one of the most profound and misunderstood concepts in all of Eastern philosophy, a universal law that governs the creation of our unique reality, the law of cause and effect, known as karma. Of all the concepts that have journeyed from the East to the West, perhaps none has been more distorted in the passage than the law of karma. In the popular imagination, it has been flattened into a kind of cosmic bookkeeping, a system of divine reward and punishment. We use phrases like, "what goes around," comes around to imply an almost immediate tit-for-tat justice. We think of it as a celestial vending machine, where good deeds are inserted to receive blessings, and bad deeds result in karmic retribution. It is often confused with fate or destiny, a predetermined script for our lives that we are powerless to change. This popular understanding, while convenient for simple morality tales, is a profound misreading of one of the most empowering and subtle natural laws ever described. To truly grasp its meaning, we must first wipe the slate clean of these caricatures. The word itself, in the ancient language of Sanskrit, is beautifully simple. Karma does not mean fate, or punishment, or reward. It simply means action. At its core, karma is a law as impersonal and reliable as gravity. Gravity does not judge you for stepping off a ledge. It does not punish you for your arrogance or carelessness. It is simply the natural, unavoidable consequence of a specific action. The law of karma functions in precisely the same way. It is not a sentient being, a cosmic judge weighing our virtues and vices on a golden scale. It is the inherent, built-in potential within every action to produce a corresponding result. The universe does not punish us for our actions. It simply returns to us the harvest of the seeds we ourselves have sown. The labels we apply, good karma or bad karma, are our own interpretations. They are a shorthand for a simple truth. Actions motivated by generosity, kindness, and clarity tend to produce results that we experience as happiness and peace. Actions motivated by greed, hatred, and ignorance tend to produce results that we experience as suffering and turmoil. The law itself is neutral. It is the quality of our own intention that gives the action its color and determines the nature of the fruit it will eventually bear. The mechanism of karma operates through what are known as the three gates of action: the body, speech, and the mind. The actions of the body are the most obvious physical act of help or an act of harm. The actions of speech are more subtle words of comfort and truth, or words of slander and cruelty. But the most powerful and primary gate of action, the one from which all others spring, is the mind. Buddhist philosophy places enormous emphasis on intention. It is the volition, the mental impulse behind the act, that is the most potent factor in creating karma. A physical gift given with a resentful heart carries a very different karmic weight than the same gift given with pure, selfless generosity. An accidental word that causes hurt is vastly different from a word intentionally designed to wound. This is a revolutionary concept. It means that our thoughts themselves are actions. A mind cultivated in anger, jealousy, and resentment is actively planting the seeds of its own future suffering, even if it never translates into a physical act. A mind cultivated in compassion, forgiveness, and understanding is actively planting the seeds of its own future peace, right here and now, in the silent garden of consciousness. This gardening analogy is perhaps the most useful way to understand the process. Every single action we perform through body, speech, or mind is like planting a seed. An act of anger plants a seed of anger. An act of kindness plants a seed of kindness. Now, a crucial aspect of this law is that seeds do not always sprout immediately. They lie dormant in the soil of our mind stream, waiting for the right conditions to ripen. They need water, sunlight, and time. This explains why the world often seems so unjust. We see cruel people prosper and kind people suffer, and we question the existence of any moral order. But we are only seeing a snapshot in time. We do not see the seeds they have planted in the past, nor the conditions that are currently causing those specific seeds to ripen. The harvest is inevitable, but its timing is not always linear or immediate. This brings us to the famous Taoist parable of the farmer and his horse, a story that perfectly illustrates the folly of making quick judgments about fortune and misfortune. An old farmer lived in a poor village. One day, his only horse, his most valuable possession, ran away. His neighbors all came to console him, clicking their tongues and saying, "Oh, what terrible luck! This is a disaster." The old farmer simply listened and replied, "Maybe." A week later, his horse returned, and it was leading a herd of magnificent wild horses. The neighbors, overjoyed, rushed to the farmer. "What incredible good fortune!" they exclaimed. "You are a rich man now." The old farmer calmly replied, "Maybe." The next day, the farmer's only son was trying to tame one of the wild horses when he was thrown off and his leg was badly broken. The neighbors gathered again, shaking their heads. "How awful," they said. "Your son, crippled for life. This is truly bad luck." The old farmer looked at his son's injury and said, "Maybe." A few weeks passed, and the emperor's army marched into the village, forcibly conscripting every able-bodied young man for a brutal war from which few would return. The neighbors wept, as their sons were taken away. But the army doctors saw the farmer's son with his broken leg and left him behind. This story reveals the wisdom of withholding judgment. The farmer understands that life is not a series of isolated, disconnected events. It is a continuous, flowing chain of causes and effects. What appears to be a final result is merely a new cause for a future, unknown outcome. The bad luck of the runaway horse was the cause of the good luck of the new herd. The good luck of the herd was the cause of the bad luck of the broken leg, and the bad luck of the broken leg was the cause of the ultimate good luck of being saved from war. The farmer's wisdom lies in his humility. He knows he cannot see the entire web. He understands that every event is just one link in a vast, intricate chain of causality that stretches far beyond our limited human perspective. This understanding of karma as a complex, non-linear natural law is the absolute antithesis of fatalism. A belief in fate or a pre-written destiny suggests that we are puppets, our strings pulled by an external force, our lives a script we are merely acting out. Karma is the exact opposite. It is the ultimate declaration of human freedom and responsibility. It tells us that the pen is in our own hand. We are, at once, the inheritors of our past and the creators of our future. Our present situation, the raw material of our life, your personality, our health, our relationships, the challenges we face, the harvest of all the seeds we have planted in the past. This is our inheritance. We cannot change it. The wise path is to accept it without blame or resentment. It is simply the ground we have to work with. But the liberating truth, the central point of the entire teaching, is that in this very moment, we are free. Right now, with our very next thought, our next word, our next action, we are planting new seeds. We have the power to choose what kind of seeds we will sow. We can continue to plant the thorns of anger and fear, or we can begin to cultivate the fruits of wisdom and compassion. The past determines where we stand today, but our actions today determine where we will stand tomorrow. We are not victims of our destiny. We are the architects of it. This places the power to change directly within our own sphere of influence. We don't need to pray to an external God to change our fate. We need to change our own actions, starting with our own mind. This is an incredible and sometimes daunting responsibility. It means we can no longer blame the world, our parents, or bad luck for our persistent unhappiness. But it also means we are never truly stuck. The possibility of creating a new future is born again in every single moment. The story of the farmer hints at this deep, interconnected reality, where every event is both a cause and an effect. To truly understand how this creative process works, we must look even more deeply into this intricate web, into the very structure of reality as described by the Buddha. We must explore the profound teaching known as dependent origination. If the law of karma explains that our actions have consequences, like a stone thrown into a pond creating ripples, then the teaching of dependent origination explains the nature of the water itself. It reveals how those ripples spread, how the stone and the water and the air are all intimately connected. This teaching, known in Pali as Paticcasamuppada, is considered by many to be the Buddha's most profound and central insight. It is the master key that unlocks the deepest secrets of our experience, revealing not only how suffering is created, but how it can be undone. It moves us beyond a simple, linear view of cause and effect into a vision of reality as a vast, shimmering web of interconnectedness, where nothing, absolutely nothing, exists in isolation. The principle can be stated in a simple, elegant formula. When this is, that is. This arising, that arises. When this is not, that is not. This ceasing, that ceases. In other words, every single thing that comes into being does so only because of its relationship to other things. Nothing possesses its own independent private existence. To make this clear, consider a single sheet of paper in your hand. Where does it come from? We might say it comes from a factory, but the factory needed wood pulp from a tree. The tree needed soil, rain, and sunlight to grow. The logger who cut the tree needed parents to be born, food to eat, and air to breathe. The factory workers needed the same. The machinery in the factory was built from iron, mined from the earth. So, when we look deeply into this single sheet of paper, we can see the cloud, the sunshine, the forest, the miner, and the logger. If we were to remove any one of these elements, the sheet of paper could not exist. The paper is empty of a separate, independent self, but it is full of the entire cosmos. It is a manifestation of a web of conditions. This is true for everything. The cup of coffee on your table contains the mountain in Colombia, where the beans were grown, the rain that fell there, the farmer who tended the plants, the long journey across the ocean, the person who roasted the beans, the electricity that powers the coffee maker. Your cup of coffee is a global, economic, and ecological event. It is the same for the very thoughts you are thinking right now. They arise depending on conditions, the words you are hearing, the memories they trigger, your level of alertness, the temperature of the room. Every phenomenon, from a distant galaxy to a fleeting emotion, is a temporary gathering of countless converging conditions. Now, let us apply this radical insight to the very idea of a personal choice or a mistake. We hold a deeply ingrained belief in a solid, separate I who stands at a crossroads and makes a decision. We believe this I is the sole author of our actions. But dependent origination invites us to look more closely. Who is this I that chooses? Is it not also a conditioned phenomenon? Imagine a past decision you regret. Perhaps it was choosing a particular career path. That choice was not made in a vacuum. It was the result of 1,000 converging streams. There was the stream of your parents' expectations, the stream of your education, the stream of your financial situation at the time, the stream of your own fears and desires, the stream of the cultural values you had absorbed, your mood on the day you made the decision, a conversation you had the week before, a book you happened to read. All of these were conditions that shaped the outcome. The choice was simply the point where all these streams met and flowed into a single channel. The I who chose was not a sovereign king, making a decree, but more like a confluence of rivers, a temporary pattern formed by a multitude of forces. Seeing this does not mean we are mindless puppets. The intention we hold is still a powerful condition, a vital stream in the flow. But it is not the only stream. A beautiful and powerful metaphor from the Mahayana Buddhist tradition helps to visualize this total interconnectedness. It is the image of Indra's net. Imagine a vast cosmic net that stretches out infinitely in all directions. At every single point where the threads of the net cross, there hangs a single, perfectly clear and multifaceted jewel. Since the net is infinite, the number of jewels is infinite. The most wondrous quality of this net is that if you were to look closely into the polished surface of any one jewel, you would see reflected in it every other jewel in the entire net. Not just the jewels nearby, but all of them, stretching out to the furthest reaches of infinity. And within each of those reflections, you would see the reflections of all the other jewels again. It is a universe of infinite, mutual reflection. Each jewel's existence is defined by and contains every other jewel. If a single jewel were to sparkle a little brighter or change its color, that change would be reflected instantly, simultaneously, throughout the entire cosmic web. We are those jewels. Each of us, each event, each thought is a single node in this infinite net. Your very being contains the reflections of your ancestors, your society, the planet you live on. In turn, your every action, your every word, even the quality of your silent thoughts, sends out a ripple, a reflection that touches every other part of the net in some way. There is no such thing as a truly private action. There is no place where you end and the rest of the universe begins. The line is a mental fabrication. The personal, emotional consequence of internalizing this vision is a profound sense of relief. It is the key that unlocks the prison of blame. Firstly, the burden of self-blame for our past mistakes begins to dissolve. When we see that our flawed decision was not the act of a defective, isolated self, but the conditioned result of a million factors, the fierce, sharp-edged judgment we hold against ourselves softens. It is replaced by a more spacious and compassionate understanding. We can look back and see the tired, confused, or frightened person who made that choice, and we can recognize all the pressures and conditions that led them to that point. This does not erase our responsibility or actions, still created karma, planting seeds for the future, but it removes the toxic, paralyzing shame that keeps us chained to the past. It allows us to say, given all the conditions present at that moment, that was the inevitable outcome. Now, with new understanding, I can create new conditions. Secondly, this understanding transforms how we view others, especially those who have hurt us. When someone acts in a harmful way, our instinct is to see them as a solid source of malice. But with the wisdom of interconnectedness, we can see that their harmful action also arose from a vast web of causes and conditions. It arose from their own pain, their own ignorance, their own conditioning. This does not excuse the harm. The pain is still real, but it allows us to separate the actor from the action. We can see the person as being caught in their own web of suffering, acting from a place of delusion. This perspective cools the fires of hatred and resentment, creating a space where forgiveness becomes possible, not as a favor to them, but as an act of liberation for ourselves. Dependent origination, therefore, dismantles the very foundation of our loneliness and alienation. It shows us that the world is not a collection of separate, competing objects, but a single, fluid, and seamless process, a graceful dance of relationship. And if this is true, if everything is merely a temporary gathering of shifting conditions, then nothing can be permanent, nothing can be fixed or solid. The very nature of being conditioned implies a constant state of flux. This insight leads us directly to the next great characteristic of existence, a truth that, when truly understood, has the power to free us from our attachment to both our triumphs and our failures. This is the truth of impermanence. We live our lives in a state of quiet rebellion against a single, unavoidable truth. It is the truth of impermanence. From the moment we are born, we instinctively seek stability. We build solid houses. We seek secure jobs. We crave enduring relationships, all in a deep-seated attempt to create fixed points of certainty in a world that is fundamentally fluid. We see change as a threat, an enemy of our happiness, the decay of our bodies, the ending of a relationship, the loss of a job. These are seen as tragedies, as deviations from a desired state of permanence. But in the landscape of Buddhist thought, this fundamental law of change, known as anicca, is not a source of pessimism. It is not a morbid obsession with decay. It is seen as one of the three essential characteristics of all existence, and understanding it is not a cause for despair, but the very key to our liberation. Impermanence is not a curse. It is the prerequisite for all life and growth. Imagine a world without it, a world that was truly permanent. It would be a static, frozen reality. A wound could never heal. A misunderstanding could never be resolved. A child could never grow into an adult. Ignorance could never transform into wisdom. It is because of impermanence that everything is possible. A state of suffering is not a life sentence because it too is impermanent. A painful memory that grips you today does not have to grip you tomorrow. A feeling of regret is not a permanent stain on your character. It is a cloud passing through the vast sky of your awareness. When we truly grasp this, anicca ceases to be a threat and becomes a profound source of solace. It is the universe's whispered promise that no condition is forever, that change is always possible. This is especially true for the things we label as our mistakes. We treat our past failures as if they were statues carved from granite, permanent monuments to our inadequacy. We place them in the central square of our minds and visit them daily to pay our respects to their solid, unchanging reality. But this is an illusion. Our mistakes are not statues. They are ice sculptures, destined to change their form, to melt and flow back into the great river of experience. The very pain they cause is impermanent. The grip they have on us is impermanent. The story we tell about them is impermanent. Furthermore, the nature of the mistake itself is not fixed. Its meaning and value are subject to the same law of change. An event that you label a catastrophic failure today may be seen from the vantage point of 10 years in the future as the single most important and beneficial turning point of your life. Consider a person who deeply regrets a failed business venture. In the immediate aftermath, the experience is defined by shame, financial loss, and a sense of personal defeat. It is a clear and painful mistake, but years later, they might look back and realize that this failure taught them humility, resilience, and crucial lessons they could never have learned in a classroom. It may have pushed them onto a completely different and far more fulfilling path. The event itself, the closing of the business shahs, not changed. It is a fact in the past, but its meaning, its karmic flavor, has been completely transformed by the passage of time and the growth of wisdom. By clinging to the initial judgment of mistake, we are freezing a single frame of a very long film and refusing to see how the story unfolds. We are insisting that the meaning of the entire film is determined by that one painful scene, ignoring the character development and plot twists that are yet to come. There is a profound statement attributed to the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus, an insight that mirrors the Buddhist understanding of anicca with astonishing precision. He said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." This simple sentence is a complete teaching on the nature of reality. Let us unpack its wisdom. First, it's not the same river. This is plain to see. The water that touches your foot in one moment is, in the next moment, already downstream, replaced by new water that has traveled from afar. The river is not a static thing. It is a dynamic, ever-changing process. It maintains its identity as the river only through constant change. This is a metaphor for our life circumstances. The situation you face today, the relationship you are in, the job you have, and none of them are truly static. They are all processes, constantly in flux, made up of shifting conditions. The second part of the phrase is even more radical and more personal. And he's not the same man. The person who steps out of the river and steps back in a moment later is not the same person. In that brief interval, your body has changed. Cells have died and been born. You have breathed in and out. The electrical and chemical weather of your brain has shifted. You have had new thoughts, new sensory inputs, new feelings. The you of 1 minute ago is gone forever, as unrecoverable as the water that has already flowed to the sea. You are not a fixed entity. You are a process. You are a river. You are a continuous unfolding, a pattern of change. Your name and your memories provide a sense of continuity, but the underlying reality is one of constant flux. When we apply this profound insight to the burden of regret, the chains begin to fall away. The you who made that decision you so deeply regret the person you were 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, that person literally does not exist anymore. That person was a temporary convergence of causes and conditions, a particular pattern in the river of time who has long since flowed away. To punish the you of today for the actions of that long-gone person is a profound act of self-violence based on a case of mistaken identity. We are holding our present self hostage for the alleged crimes of a ghost. The suffering of regret is the suffering of clinging to a snapshot of a ghost and insisting it is our true and permanent self. It is the pain of standing by the river, holding a photograph of a single wave that crashed long ago, and crying because the river refuses to produce that exact same wave again. It is a fight against the very current of life, a battle that is exhausting and that we can never, ever win. Understanding Anicca is not a call to nihilism or apathy. It is a call to lightness and engagement. It allows us to hold our experiences, both good and bad, with a more open hand. When we experience success, we can enjoy it fully without clinging, knowing that it too will change. When we experience failure, we can feel the pain without being destroyed by it, knowing that it too will pass. We can learn to participate in the flow of our life with more grace, agility, and courage. We can forgive ourselves for past mistakes, not just as a feel-good exercise, but because we understand, on a cellular level, that we are not the same person who made them. We have been reformed, reborn, in every moment since. This brings us to a critical question. If the past event is gone, a mere memory of a ghost, and if its nature as a mistake is not fixed, and if the pain itself is impermanent, then why does it still hurt so much in the present moment? If the initial event is not the true source of our ongoing suffering, what is? The problem, this ancient wisdom suggests, lies not in what happens to us, but in what we add to what happens to us. It lies in the habit of our own mind to react to pain by creating even more pain. This is the crucial teaching of the second arrow. To be alive is to be vulnerable. This is a fundamental and unavoidable truth of our existence. Life, by its very nature, involves a degree of pain. It can be physical, the sudden pain of an injury, the chronic ache of an illness, the simple discomfort of a headache. It can be emotional, the sting of rejection, the sorrow of loss, the anxiety of uncertainty, and it can be social, the pain of being misunderstood, criticized, or excluded. No amount of wealth, power, or planning can build a fortress that is completely impenetrable to these experiences. This is the baseline reality of the human condition. A great deal of our modern anxiety comes from the futile attempt to engineer a life that is entirely free from discomfort, a life where nothing ever goes wrong. But the ancient wisdom of Buddhism does not offer us an escape from this reality. It does not promise a life without pain. Instead, it offers something far more profound and useful, a way to change our relationship to pain, so that while pain may be inevitable, suffering becomes optional. This crucial distinction is captured perfectly in a short but powerful teaching from a text known as the Silent Sutta, the Discourse on the Arrow. The Buddha explains that when an ordinary, untaught person experiences a painful feeling, they are, in effect, struck by an arrow. This is the first arrow. It is the raw, direct, and unavoidable impact of the event itself. It is the sharp sting of hearing a critical word. It is the hollow ache in the chest that follows a loss. It is the physical throb of a stubbed toe. This first arrow is simply a part of life's unpredictable terrain. Everyone, without exception, is struck by first arrows. Even the most enlightened sage will feel the discomfort of hunger, the sadness of seeing a loved one suffer, or the physical pain of an aging body. There is no shame in being struck by the first arrow. It is not a personal failure. It is simply the price of admission for this rich, complex, and beautiful experience of being human. The problem, the Buddha explains, is that the untaught person does not stop there. Immediately after being struck by the first arrow, they unwittingly shoot a second arrow into themselves. This second arrow is our reaction to the first. It is the story we tell ourselves about the pain. It is the storm of mental proliferation that we create around the initial event. The ammunition for this second arrow comes from the reactive patterns of our own mind. It can be the arrow of self-judgment. I'm such a fool for saying that. This is all my fault. I always mess things up. It can be the arrow of blame and resentment. How dare they treat me this way? It's completely unfair. The world is against me. It can be the arrow of fear and catastrophizing. This is a disaster. My life is ruined. I will never recover from this. What if this means I'll be alone forever? Or, perhaps most insidiously, it can be the arrow of identification, where we take the experience of failure and make it our identity. I am a failure. The pain of the first arrow is clean, simple, and direct. The suffering created by the second arrow is complex, sticky, and agonizing. The first arrow creates pain. The second arrow creates suffering. And here is the most important part. The second arrow is entirely self-inflicted. Imagine a sudden, unexpected downpour. Two people are walking home, and neither has an umbrella. The first arrow for both is identical. The initial shock of cold water, the unpleasant sensation of clothes becoming soaked. It is a moment of pure, physical discomfort. The first person immediately launches a volley of second arrows. Their body tenses up. This is horrible, they think. My whole day is ruined. I just know I'm going to get sick. Why does this kind of thing always happen to me? I have such bad luck. Their mind spins with stories of complaint, resistance, and self-pity. They arrive home not just wet, but also angry, agitated, and miserable. Their resistance to the simple reality of the rain has created a profound state of suffering, far more unpleasant than the rain itself. The second person feels the same first arrow. They feel the shock of the cold water and register the thought, it's raining, I'm getting wet. But then they stop. They do not add a second story. They do not complain about the injustice of the weather. They do not project into the future about getting sick. They simply accept the raw, sensory reality of the present moment. The feeling of water on their skin, the sound of the rain hitting the pavement, the sight of the world washed clean. They continue to walk home, and while they may be physically uncomfortable, their mind is at peace. They arrive home just as wet as the first person, but they are not suffering. The rain, the first arrow, was the same for both. The entirety of the difference in their experience came from the presence or absence of the second arrow. The entire path of mindfulness and Buddhist practice can be seen as the training to become the second person. It is not about developing a magical shield that deflects the rain. It is about developing the wisdom to not stab ourselves in the leg just because we are getting wet. The practice of mindfulness creates a small gap, a precious moment of awareness between the impact of the first arrow and the habitual, automatic launch of the second. In that gap lies our freedom. We learn to feel the raw energy of an emotion, the heat of anger, the coldness of fear, the heaviness of sadness as a pure sensation in the body, without immediately weaving a narrative of blame or judgment around it. We learn to observe the arising of our second arrow thoughts, I'm a failure, this is unfair, and to see them for what they are, just thoughts. They are mental events, like clouds passing in the sky. We do not have to believe them. We do not have to grab onto them. We do not have to pick up the bow and shoot. This is the essence of true emotional resilience. Resilience is not the absence of difficulty. It is the ability to move through difficulty without adding unnecessary, self-inflicted suffering. It is the capacity to get knocked down by life, which will happen, and to feel the pain of the impact without then commencing a prolonged session of beating ourselves up for having fallen. The second arrow explains why two people can go through a very similar difficult event, like a divorce or a job loss, and have wildly different outcomes. One person is crushed by it for years, trapped in a cycle of blame, regret, and victimhood, a constant barrage of second arrows. The other person, while feeling the acute pain of the loss, is able to move through the grieving process and eventually find new growth and meaning, precisely because they are not chronically wounding themselves with the stories they tell about what happened. This teaching is a radical act of compassion for ourselves. It invites us to gently notice our habit of shooting second arrows and to consider laying down the bow. It reassures us that feeling the pain of the first arrow is okay. It is human. The real work is in learning to stop adding insult to injury, to stop pouring the salt of our own judgment into the wounds of our life. Freedom is not a life without first arrows. Freedom is a life where we are no longer addicted to shooting the second. Now, if we can learn to stop making the pain worse, can we perhaps go one step further? Is it possible to not only endure the first arrow, but to actually use it as a catalyst for our own transformation? Can we learn the secret of the alchemists who sought to turn base metals into gold? Can we take the lead of our failures and mistakes and transmute them into the pure gold of wisdom? Having learned to recognize the second arrow, having made the commitment to stop inflicting unnecessary suffering upon ourselves, we arrive at a new frontier. It is one thing to endure the inevitable pains of life without making them worse. It is another thing entirely to actively transform them into something of value. This is not just a defensive maneuver. It is a creative act of profound spiritual significance. It is the practice of a kind of inner alchemy. The alchemists of old dreamed of a philosopher's stone, a magical substance that could transmute base metals like lead into pure, shining gold. While they never found their stone in the chemical world, the principle they were searching for points to a deep, psychological and spiritual truth. It is possible to take the heavy, dull, and toxic lead of our failures, our regrets, and our deepest pains, and through the crucible of our own awareness, transmute them into the shining gold of wisdom, compassion, and strength. This alchemical process begins with a radical re-evaluation of what constitutes a wasted experience. In the common view, a failed relationship, a bankrupt business, or years spent on a wrong career path are considered wasted time, black holes in our life's resume. But from the alchemist's perspective, no experience is ever truly wasted, provided we are willing to extract the lesson from it. An experience only becomes waste when we refuse its teaching, when we wallow in the bitterness of the first arrow and the endless self-recrimination of the second. Think of it like physical exercise. A muscle does not grow stronger by remaining comfortable. It grows stronger by being stressed, by being pushed to the point of failure, where its fibers are literally broken down. The pain and fatigue are not the goal, but they are the necessary catalysts for the growth that follows. In the same way, our spiritual and emotional muscle qualities like patience, forgiveness, humility, and empathy are often strengthened most effectively in the gym of adversity. The pain of our mistakes is the resistance that builds our inner strength. When we adopt this view, life ceases to be a performance, to be judged, and becomes instead a curriculum to be studied. Every event, every person, every challenge becomes a teacher, offering us a new lesson in the great subject of what it means to be human. The key to unlocking these lessons lies in the quality of the questions we ask ourselves when faced with difficulty. The untrained mind, the mind of the victim, defaults to one question: why is this happening to me? Let us dissect this question. The word why sends the mind searching for a cause in the past, a search that is often fruitless and frustrating, leading only to a loop of blame and resentment. The phrase to me centers the ego, creating a narrative of personal injury and cosmic injustice. It is a question that drains our power, casting us as the passive recipient of a hostile world's actions. It is a dead end. The alchemist, the student of life, learns to ask a different, far more powerful question. What is this trying to teach me? The power of this simple shift is immense. The word what is practical and forward-looking. It seeks information, not blame. The phrase to teach me accomplishes two things at once. It presumes that the experience, no matter how painful, contains a valuable lesson, and it immediately casts us in the role of a student, an active learner, rather than a passive victim. This question takes the power back from the external event and places it squarely in our own hands. A painful breakup ceases to be just an act of betrayal and becomes a lesson in attachment, communication, or self-worth. A sudden job loss is no longer just a financial disaster. It is an opportunity to reevaluate our path, to discover a hidden passion, or to learn about our own resilience in the face of uncertainty. This single question is the philosopher's stone. It is the catalyst that begins the transmutation. The late Thai forest meditation master, Ajahn Chah, embodied this alchemical wisdom in his simple, direct teachings. One day, while talking to a group of students, he picked up an empty drinking glass. He held it up and said, "You see this glass? For me, this glass is already broken." He was not being morbid or pessimistic. He was demonstrating a mind that lives in radical acceptance of impermanence. He continued, "I enjoy this glass. It holds my water admirably. I watch the light shine through it, but I understand that its nature is fragile, and one day it will inevitably break. So I enjoy it for what it is now, in this moment. And when the day comes that the wind blows it off the shelf, or my elbow knocks it to the floor, and it shatters into 1,000 pieces, I will not be shocked or dismayed. I will simply say, of course, this is the pinnacle of the alchemical art. By fully accepting the inherent nature of the glassets, impermanency drains the future event of its power to cause him to suffer. The breaking of the glass is not a mistake. It is not a tragedy. It is simply the glass fulfilling its destiny, revealing its true nature. When the first arrow of the shattering glass arrives, there is no fertile ground for a second arrow of distress to land, because the event was already understood and accepted. The potential lead of a negative experience has been transmuted in advance into the gold of a confirmed insight into the nature of reality. To cultivate this transformative perspective, requires one essential ingredient: humility. To become a student of life, we must first have the humility to admit that we are not its master. The mind of pride and arrogance is the greatest obstacle to learning. The arrogant mind believes it knows everything. It cannot tolerate being wrong. When it makes a mistake, its only recourse is to deny it, to hide it, or to blame it on someone else. The identity of the ego is so invested in being right that it cannot afford to learn from being wrong. The humble mind, in contrast, understands that it is a work in progress. It is open, curious, and receptive. For the humble mind, a mistake is not an indictment of its character. It is simply new information. It is a welcome, if sometimes painful, opportunity to refine its understanding of the world and of itself. Humility is the universal solvent that dissolves the ego's resistance to being taught. It is the catalyst that allows the lead of failure to be broken down, melted, and reformed into the gold of wisdom. Without humility, the alchemical process cannot even begin. Therefore, the way of the alchemist is a conscious and continuous choice. It is the choice to find meaning in every corner of our existence. It is the choice to ask empowering questions instead of debilitating ones. It is the choice to embrace the ever-changing, fragile nature of our lives with open hands rather than clenched fists. It is the choice to cultivate the humility of a lifelong student rather than the brittle pride of a master. It is the refusal to believe that any part of our story is meaningless, the refusal to accept that any experience is pure waste. It is the deep and abiding faith that every piece of our life, especially the difficult, messy, and painful pieces, can be used as fuel for the fire of our own awakening. But this profound inner work, this transformation of experience, from suffering into wisdom, cannot happen if our mind is elsewhere. We cannot learn the lesson of a moment if we are lost in ruminating about the past or worrying about the future. The alchemist's laboratory, the crucible where this sacred transformation takes place, is not in the realm of memory or imagination. It can only be found in one place: the vibrant, immediate, and all-powerful reality of the present moment. Having explored the great, impersonal laws of our existence, interconnectedness, and impermanence, we must now turn our attention to the only place where these laws can be directly experienced, the only arena where our life actually unfolds. We spend most of our waking hours in a state of subtle distraction, our minds functioning like restless time machines. In any given moment, we are rarely ever fully where we are. We are driving to work, but our mind is in the past, replaying a tense conversation from the night before. We are sitting with a loved one, but our mind is in the future, rehearsing a presentation for the next day. We are eating a meal, but we are lost in a daydream, barely tasting the food. This constant shuttling between a past that is gone and a future that does not exist has become our default state of being. And it is this habit of being absent from our own lives that is the hidden root of so much of our anxiety and dissatisfaction. The truth is, the past and the future are phantom realms. They do not exist as independent realities. The past exists only as a collection of memories, a series of neural patterns stored in the brain. When we go to the past, we are not visiting a real place. We are activating a story, a narrative that is filtered and edited by our current mood, our beliefs, and everything that has happened since. The memory of an event is not the event itself, any more than a photograph of a fire can warm you. The past is a ghost. Likewise, the future exists only as a projection, a series of thoughts and images created by our mind. We conjure up countless potential, future some desirable, some terrifying, and we live in them as if they were real. We exhaust ourselves, preparing for battles that may never happen, and celebrating victories that are pure fantasy. The future is a dream. The only thing that is ever real, the only point of contact we have with life itself, is the fragile, fleeting, and infinitely precious present moment, right now. As you hear these words, the sensation of the air in your lungs, the feeling of the surface you are sitting on, the subtle sounds in the room around you, this is reality. This is the only place life is ever happening. When we understand the illusory nature of the past and future, we can see the geography of our own suffering with new clarity. All regret is rooted in the past. It is the act of taking the vibrant, living energy of the present moment and pouring it into the black hole of a past that cannot be changed. It is the futile attempt to mentally unscramble an egg. All anxiety is rooted in the future. It is the act of taking our present energy and scattering it across 1,000 imaginary scenarios, most of them negative. It is the exhausting effort of fighting shadows of our own creation. Regret and anxiety are the illnesses of a mind that has forgotten how to be where it is. Peace, therefore, is not a mystical state we must strive to achieve. It is our natural condition. It is what we find waiting for us when we finally stop running, when we withdraw our energy from the phantom realms of past and future and allow it to rest in its natural home, the here and now. Peace is not something you get. It is something you return to. There is a classic story about the wise fool of Sufi folklore, Mullah Nasreddin, that perfectly illustrates our predicament. A friend finds Nasreddin one night on his hands and knees, frantically searching for something on the ground beneath a brightly lit streetlight. "Mullah, what have you lost?" the friend asks. "I have lost my key," Nasreddin says with great urgency. Eager to help, the friend gets down on his own knees and joins the search. After a long time, having found nothing, the friend asks, "Mullah, are you absolutely certain that you lost the key right here?" Nasreddin looks up and replies, "Oh, no, I lost it inside my house, where it is completely dark." The friend, exasperated, asks, "Then why on earth are we searching for it out here?" Nasreddin answers calmly, "Because this is where the light is. We are all Nasreddin. The key to our peace, our happiness, our freedom from suffering has been lost somewhere in the unexamined darkness of our own minds. But instead of turning our attention inward to find it, we keep searching for it outside, under the artificial light of past and future. We search for it in regret, endlessly analyzing what went wrong, because the story of the past is a familiar, well-lit narrative. We search for it in our future hopes, believing that a new job, a new relationship, or more money will finally be the key that unlocks our happiness. We search in these places because our mind is drawn to them, to the light of thought and projection. The wisdom of the story is the realization that we are searching in the wrong place. The only place we can ever find the key is where we lost it, within ourselves, in the present moment. The light we need is not the streetlight of thought, but the inner light of awareness. This brings us to the true locus of our power. The present moment is not just the only place where reality exists. It is the only point where we have any true agency. We are utterly powerless to change the past. The words have been said, the deeds have been done. To expend energy, trying to mentally fix what has already occurred, is as useless as trying to catch yesterday's wind in a net. We are also largely powerless to control the future directly. The future will arise from an almost infinite web of causes and conditions, most of which are far beyond our command. Our point of power is the fulcrum between these two phantom realms. It is the now. The future is not a destination we are traveling to. It is a reality we are creating, moment by precious moment. The quality of your future is being determined by the quality of your present. If you fill this moment with distraction, anger, and unconsciousness, you are planting the seeds for a future of distraction, anger, and unconsciousness. If you fill this moment with awareness, with kindness, with a conscious intention, you are planting the seeds for a future of clarity and peace. The only way to ensure a peaceful future is to be peaceful now. The only way to build a compassionate life is to practice compassion in this moment. The future is nothing more than the harvest of a continuous series of present moments. Therefore, returning to the present is not a passive act of resignation. It is the most active and creative thing we can possibly do. It is the act of coming home to our own life. It is in the present moment that we can heal from the past, not by changing it, but by holding the memory of it with a new, compassionate awareness. It is in the present moment that we can build a better future, not by worrying about it, but by living this one moment with as much wisdom and care as we can muster. To be absent from the now is to be absent from your life. It is to miss the only thing that is truly yours. But if arriving in the present is the key to our peace and the source of all our power, a critical question remains. How do we do it? Our minds are like wild horses, conditioned for a lifetime to roam freely through the fields of past and future. What is the practical method, the gentle rein, that can train this wild mind to come home, to rest, even for just a moment, in the boundless field of the present? This leads us directly to the foundational practice that makes all this inner work possible, the art and science of mindfulness. We have arrived at the heart of the practice. We have spoken of the need to inhabit the present moment, but talk is cheap. The mind is a creature of habit, and its most deeply ingrained habit is to wander. For years, we have allowed it to roam wild through the phantom fields of past and future. To gently ask it to come home, to rest in the now, requires more than just an idea. It requires a tool, a technique, a practice. That practice is mindfulness. But before we explore what mindfulness is, it is crucial to understand what it is not. Mindfulness is not about stopping your thoughts. It is not about emptying your mind. It is not an attempt to achieve a blissful, trance-like state where nothing can bother you. It is not about becoming cold, detached, or emotionless. These are common and intimidating misconceptions that make the practice seem impossible. The reality is far simpler, more accessible, and more compassionate. Mindfulness is the art of paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment. That's it. It is a simple, direct, and intimate act of friendship with your own mind. Most of us live our lives on a sophisticated form of autopilot. From the moment we wake up, a chain reaction of habits is triggered. We check our phone, brush our teeth, make coffee, and commute to work, often with very little conscious awareness of what we are actually doing. Our minds are elsewhere, planning, worrying, remembering. This autopilot mode is a marvel of brain efficiency. It allows us to perform complex tasks without expending much mental energy. The problem is not the autopilot itself, but the fact that it has taken over almost every aspect of our lives. We are on autopilot in our conversations, half listening while we formulate our reply. We are on autopilot when we eat, barely tasting our food. We are on autopilot in our reactions to life's challenges, responding with the same conditioned patterns of anger, fear, or withdrawal, time and time again. We have become passengers in the vehicle of our own life, being driven around by the whims of our habits and conditioning. Mindfulness is the simple, radical act of sliding over into the driver's seat. It is the choice to intentionally take the wheel, even for just a few moments at a time, and consciously participate in our own journey. The most direct way to begin this practice is by using the breath as an anchor to the present moment. The breath is a perfect object of attention because it is always with you and it is always happening now. You cannot take a breath in the past, nor can you take one in the future. It is a constant, reliable rhythm of reality. The invitation is simple. Wherever you are, just for a moment, bring your attention to the physical sensation of your breathing. You don't need to change it, control it, or judge it. Just notice it. Feel the slight coolness of the air as it enters your nostrils. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest or abdomen. Simply rest your awareness on these raw, physical sensations. Now, within a few seconds, something will happen. Your mind will wander. It will be distracted by a sound, pulled into a memory, or jump ahead to a plan. This is not a mistake. This is not a sign that you are failing at mindfulness. This is simply what minds do. This moment of recognition, the moment you realize, oh, my mind has wandered, the golden moment of the practice. In that moment, you are awake. The practice itself is what you do next. Without any scolding or judgment, you gently, kindly, and patiently guide your attention back to the feeling of the breath. That's the entire exercise. And a few seconds later, your mind will wander again, and you will notice, and you will gently return. This process of wandering, noticing, and gently returning is the core of the practice. Each return is like a single push-up for your brain, strengthening the muscle of attention and awareness. To understand the non-judgmental quality of this awareness, it is helpful to use the metaphor of the weather. Imagine you are sitting comfortably inside your house, looking out a large window at the sky. Some days, the sky is clear, blue, and filled with sunshine. Other days, it is grey and overcast. On some days, a violent thunderstorm rolls in, with dark clouds, flashing lightning, and booming thunder. As you sit and watch, do you take the weather personally? Do you believe that you are the thunderstorm? Do you get angry at the sky for being grey? Of course not. You recognize that the weather is a natural, impersonal process that arises due to various conditions, and that it will, in time, pass. You, the observer behind the window, remain untouched and unharmed by the storm. Mindfulness teaches us to relate to our own thoughts and emotions in the same way. Our mind is the sky. Our thoughts and feelings are the weather. Sometimes, our inner weather is sunny and pleasant. Other times, a storm of anger, a thick fog of sadness, or a flurry of anxiety passes through. The practice is to become the spacious, accepting sky that can hold all of this weather without identifying with it. We learn to say, there is anger, instead of, I am angry. We see the thought, I'm a failure, arise, and we recognize it simply as a thought cloud passing by, not as an ultimate truth about who we are. We are not the weather, we are the sky. This practice of cultivating non-judgmental awareness creates something incredibly precious in our lives. A space. As the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl wrote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. For most of us, that space is so small, it is virtually non-existent. A stimulus occurs, someone cuts us off in traffic and an immediate, conditioned, autopilot response is triggered. We lay on the horn and feel a surge of rage. There was no choice. There was only reaction. Mindfulness practice is the act of widening that space between stimulus and response. With practice, when the stimulus occurs, a moment of awareness arises within us. We feel the raw energy of anger as heat in the chest, as tension in the jaw. We see the thought, "That idiot," form in our mind. But because we see it with awareness, we are not immediately consumed by it. We are standing in that sacred space of choice, and from this space, we are free. We can still choose to honk the horn, but we could also choose to take a deep breath, to relax our grip on the wheel, to let it go. This is the birthplace of conscious choice. This is where we stop being slaves to our past conditioning and start becoming the architects of our present reality. Mindfulness, then, is not some esoteric goal to be achieved in the distant future. It is a simple, compassionate process of returning, again and again, to the life that is right here. It is the fundamental tool that illuminates our inner world. It is the light we use to find the key we lost in the dark. It is the anchor that holds us steady in the storms of our own minds. And with this tool firmly in hand, with this light of awareness switched on, we can now begin to examine the very forces that motivate our actions. We can start to look closely at the impulses that drive us, learning to distinguish between the frantic, desperate clamor of the ego's ambition and the quiet, steady, and trustworthy voice of our own deepest intention. In the engine room of the human psyche, there is a fundamental force that drives us forward. It is the force of desire, the innate impulse to move toward a future that is different from the present. A spiritual life is not about extinguishing this fire, for a life without any desire would be inert and empty. The crucial question is not whether we have goals, but what kind of fuel we are burning. What is the source of our motivation? With the light of mindfulness, we can begin to distinguish between two profoundly different kinds of fuel. One is the volatile, high-octane fuel of ambition. The other is the clean, steady, and sustainable energy of intention. Understanding the difference between these two is the key to transforming our life from a frantic race into a graceful journey. Ambition, as it is commonly understood, is born from the ego. It springs from a deep, often unconscious, feeling of lack. It is the voice of the separate self that whispers, "I am not enough, as I am. I am incomplete. I am deficient." This inner poverty creates a desperate hunger for something external to fill the void. That something can be wealth, status, recognition, power, or even the approval of a specific person. Ambition constructs a future where, once the goal is achieved, the feeling of lack will finally disappear and we will be whole, happy, and secure. The entire enterprise of ambition is future-oriented. The present moment is devalued. It becomes merely a stepping stone, a means to a future end. The qualities of the ambitious mind are tightness, anxiety, and a relentless, grasping quality. It is fiercely competitive, constantly measuring itself against others, perpetually afraid of falling behind. Life becomes a ladder, and the only goal is to climb, often without questioning if the ladder is leaning against the right wall. This is where the mistake becomes an inevitability, because ambition is rigidly attached to a single, specific outcome: the promotion, the prize, the perfect partner. It is inherently fragile. It is making a contract with a future that it cannot control. Life, as we know, is defined by impermanence and interconnectedness. It is a fluid, unpredictable dance. When the chaotic, uncontrollable reality of life does not conform to the ego's rigid blueprint, Ambition experiences this deviation as a catastrophic failure. The mistake is not seen as a simple event, but as a personal affront, an indictment of the self. This leads to the bitter poisons of frustration, envy of those who succeeded, and a deep-seated resentment toward a world that refused to cooperate with our plans. The path of ambition is a stressful, precarious one, built on the fantasy of control and destined for the suffering of disappointment. Now, let us consider a different way, a different fuel. In Buddhist psychology, there is a concept called chanda. It is often translated as wholesome desire or skillful intention. Unlike ambition, which arises from a sense of lack, chanda arises from a sense of fullness and purpose. It is not the desire to get something for the ego, but the pure-hearted desire to do something meaningful. It is the natural impulse to express our deepest values in the world. It is the simple desire to learn, to create, to help, to grow, to be kind, to understand. The qualities of a mind guided by chanda are spaciousness, patience, and joy. It is cooperative, not competitive. It is focused on the present moment, because the joy is found in the quality of the action itself, not in the promise of a future reward. Chanda provides a direction, like a compass needle pointing north, but it is not fixated on a single destination on the map. It is flexible, adaptable, and resilient, ready to navigate the twists and turns of life's terrain with grace. Imagine a master sculptor at work in her studio. She could be driven by ambition. In this case, her mind would be filled with thoughts of the future. She would be obsessed with the prize she might win, the price the statue will fetch, the glowing reviews she might receive. Every strike of her chisel would be filled with anxiety. Is this good enough? Is this what they want? A small slip of the tool would be a disaster, a blemish on her path to glory. The entire process would be a tightrope walk of stress and fear. The joy, if it comes at all, is deferred to a future that may never arrive. Now, imagine the same sculptor guided by intention, by chanda. Her intention is not to win a prize, but to reveal the beauty she perceives sleeping within the block of stone. Her focus is not on the future, but on the rich, sensory reality of the present moment. She is absorbed in the dance. Her full attention is on the texture of the stone, the weight of the hammer in her hand, the sound of the chisel's bite, the way the light falls upon a newly carved curve. A slip of the tool is not a mistake. It is new information. It is the stone speaking to her, suggesting a new direction. She is not imposing her will upon the stone. She is collaborating with it. Her joy is not a distant goal. It is present in every single moment of the creative process. The final statue, when it is complete, is not a trophy of her ambition, but a beautiful byproduct of her joyful, present moment attention. This is the key. When we act from a place of wholesome intention, it becomes almost impossible to truly fail. If your intention in a difficult conversation is simply to listen with an open heart, you have already succeeded the moment you begin to listen, regardless of the other person's reaction. If your intention in a new job is to contribute your skills and learn as much as you can, you have already succeeded the moment you begin to learn. Even if you never get a promotion, the success is internal, immediate, and entirely within your control. The external outcomes become secondary. When you act from ambition and the world does not deliver your desired result, your ego is crushed. When you act from a clear, wholesome intention and the result is not what you expected, there is no fertile ground for regret. You can look back on your action and know, with deep certainty, my intention was pure. I acted from a place of kindness and integrity. The outcome was shaped by a million other conditions beyond my control. The action itself becomes its own reward. This is a profound shift from outcome orientation to process orientation. Ambition is obsessed with the destination. Intention finds its fulfillment in the journey. Ambition is a hungry ghost, perpetually seeking external validation to fill an inner void. It is a state of constant becoming that never arrives at being. Intention is a wellspring, overflowing from a sense of purpose that is discovered and rediscovered in the present moment. It is a state of being that makes the becoming a joyful dance. With the light of mindfulness, we can begin to notice the flavor of our own motivations. When we set a goal, we can ask ourselves, does this feel tight and grasping, or spacious and joyful? Is this about proving my worth or expressing my values? Is this about filling a hole or sharing a gift? Learning to act from intention is the key to a life of integrity and peace. A life free from the exhausting and painful cycle of frantic striving and inevitable disappointment. Acting with this wisdom liberates our present and future choices. But what of our past? What about the residue of all those actions we took when we were still fueled by ambition, fear, and ignorance? To truly move forward with a clear heart, we must first make peace with the path behind us. This requires us to undertake one of the most challenging and most healing of all human practices, the practice of forgiveness. In the quiet landscape of the mind, past grievances can take root like invasive weeds, choking the life out of the present moment. We may have intellectually understood the laws of impermanence and interconnectedness. We may have learned to act from intention instead of ambition, but there can remain a stubborn, toxic residue from the past, the poison of unforgiveness. We often carry our resentments like badges of honor, believing that our anger is a righteous shield that protects us, or a just weapon that punishes those who have wronged us. But this is a profound illusion. To hold on to unforgiveness, whether toward another or toward ourselves, is the spiritual equivalent of drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. The only person who is harmed, the only person who is trapped, is the one who refuses to let go. Forgiveness, therefore, is not a gift we bestow upon others. It is not an act of condoning a harmful action. It is the ultimate act of self-liberation, the moment we decide to put down the heavy, burning coals of the past, so that we can finally heal our own hands. The most difficult and most essential form of this practice is self-forgiveness. Our capacity for being cruel to ourselves often far exceeds our capacity for being cruel to anyone else. We can be our own harshest judge, our own most relentless tormentor. When we look back at a past mistake, a moment of weakness, or a harmful choice, a voice inside us may rise up and say, "That was unforgivable. I don't deserve peace. I deserve to suffer for what I did." This voice believes it is upholding a high moral standard, but it is actually just perpetuating a cycle of pain. To forgive yourself is not to say, "What I did was okay." It is to say, "I am more than my worst mistake." It is a courageous act of looking at your past self with compassion and understanding. It is the recognition that the person who made that choice was operating with the level of wisdom, the emotional maturity, and under the specific set of conditions that were present at that time. Given who you were then and the circumstances you were in, the outcome was what it was. To continue punishing the person you are today for the ignorance of a person who no longer exists is both illogical and profoundly unkind. Self-forgiveness is the mature acceptance of your own flawed, beautiful, and ever-evolving humanity. It is treating yourself with the same gentle understanding you would offer a dear friend who was suffering. There is a dramatic story from the life of the Buddha that illustrates the almost boundless power of compassion to overcome the past. It is the story of a terrifying serial killer named Angulimala. His name literally meant garland of fingers, because he wore a gruesome necklace made from the fingers of his many victims. He was a figure of pure terror, a man so lost in violence that entire villages lived in fear of him. One day, the Buddha was walking calmly on a road that passed through Angulimala's territory. The killer saw him from a distance and was overjoyed, thinking the solitary monk would be an easy victim. He began to run, but a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was only walking at a normal pace, Angulimala, running with all his might, could not catch up to him. Exasperated, he yelled out, "Stop, monk! Stop!" The Buddha, without turning, replied in a clear, calm voice, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." This paradoxical response broke through the killer's rage. "What do you mean?" he demanded. The Buddha turned to him, his gaze filled not with fear or condemnation, but with an unshakable and radiant compassion. He explained, "I have stopped, for I have laid down all violence against living beings. It is you who are still running on the endless wheel of hatred, causing harm to yourself and others, never finding peace." In that moment, Angulimala was met with something he had never experienced before. He was not seen as a monster, but as a suffering human being. The Buddha's profound compassion was a mirror that allowed Angulimala to see the depth of his own misery for the first time. The weight of his horrific actions crashed down upon him, and he threw down his sword and wept, begging to become a disciple. The Buddha accepted him. This is a story of radical forgiveness and transformation. If a man who had committed such terrible deeds could be met with compassion, could be forgiven, and could go on to completely transform his life and become an enlightened being, then surely we can find it within ourselves to forgive our own, much smaller trespasses. The story teaches us that no one is defined forever by their past actions. The agent of change is not judgment or punishment, but the healing power of a compassionate heart. It is crucial to understand that forgiveness, especially when the wounds are deep, is not a single event. It is not like flipping a switch. It is a process, a journey that unfolds over time. There may be days when you feel a sense of release, a lightness in your heart, only to find that the next day, the familiar weed of resentment has sprouted again. This is normal. It is not a sign of failure. Forgiveness is a practice, much like mindfulness. It is the conscious, repeated intention to let go of the burden. It is the act of gently returning, over and over again, to a place of compassion for yourself and for others. The process requires immense patience. It begins with simply acknowledging the pain, allowing yourself to feel the hurt without judgment. Then, it moves to cultivating understanding, seeing the web of conditions that led to the harmful act. Finally, it culminates in the gentle, repeated intention to release the grievance, not for anyone else's sake, but for your own. You are choosing freedom over bondage, peace over conflict in this present moment. Letting go of old resentments is like cleaning out a cluttered room in your own house. For years, you have kept the door shut, afraid to look at the mess inside. The practice of forgiveness is the act of bravely opening that door, letting in the fresh air and light of awareness. You begin to pick up each painful memory, each grievance sand. You look at it with clarity and kindness. You acknowledge its presence, and then you make the conscious choice to put it down, to let it go. Some pieces are easy to discard, others are heavier, and you may have to pick them up and put them down many times before you can truly release your grip. But with each act of release, the room becomes lighter, more spacious, more livable. You are not erasing the past. You are simply refusing to allow it to dominate the precious living space of your present. This is the ultimate act of reclaiming your inner home. You are putting down the poison. You are releasing the hot coal. You are setting yourself free from a prison of your own making. Now, with the inner landscape cleared by forgiveness, we are better equipped to move forward. But what happens when the judgment is not coming from within, but from the outside world? What do we do when others point to our past, blame us for our mistakes, and threaten our newfound peace? How do we remain steady when the arrows of criticism are flying at us from others? This challenge requires a new kind of skill, a way to maintain our inner balance in the face of external storms. Having journeyed inward to make peace with our own past, we must inevitably turn our attention outward again. For even when we have found a measure of inner calm, we do not live in a vacuum. We live in a world of other people, a world of swirling opinions, judgments, and expectations. We will be praised, and we will be blamed. We will be understood, and we will be misunderstood. This is an unavoidable feature of the human landscape. In Buddhist teachings, these external pressures are known as the 8 worldly winds. They are praise and blame, success and failure, pleasure and pain, fame and disrepute. The ordinary, untrained mind is like a leaf at the mercy of these winds, blown high into elation by praise and success, then dashed to the ground in despair by blame and failure. Our sense of well-being becomes entirely dependent on which way the wind is blowing on any given day. The goal of the spiritual path is not to stop the winds from blowing, for that is impossible, but to become like a great mountain, solid and unmoving, able to feel the winds blow against it, without being shaken from its foundation. The first step in cultivating this inner mountain is a radical and often difficult realization. No one outside of you has the power to make you angry or to make you feel ashamed. Other people can say words, they can perform actions, but the emotional response that arises from those words and actions is generated entirely within your own mind. When someone criticizes us, the sting we feel is not caused by their words alone, but by their words striking a tender, insecure part of our own ego. Our anger is the ego's defense mechanism, rushing to protect a fragile identity that it believes is under attack. Our shame is the ego's painful recognition that its carefully constructed image of being good or right has been threatened. The entire emotional drama is an internal event. This insight is not meant to invalidate our feelings, but to empower us. If we believe others have the power to control our emotions, we are their perpetual victim. But if we recognize that we are the ones generating the anger, the shame, or the hurt, then we also realize that we have the power to choose a different response. The locus of control shifts from the unpredictable outer world to the trainable inner world. There is a timeless story from the Taoist sage Zhuangzi that perfectly illuminates how to put this insight into practice. A man was enjoying a peaceful afternoon, rowing his small boat across a misty river. He was absorbed in the quiet beauty of the moment. Suddenly, with a loud jolt, another boat crashed into his. His tranquility was shattered. Immediately, a surge of hot rage filled him. He stood up and began to shout, unleashing a torrent of insults at the careless person in the other boat who had ruined his peace. He yelled and cursed, his voice echoing across the water, but there was no reply. Growing even more furious at being ignored, he maneuvered his boat closer, ready to give the fool a piece of his mind. But as he peered into the other vessel, he saw that there was no one there. It was an empty boat, adrift on the current that had bumped into him. In that instant, all of his anger vanished. It was impossible to be angry at an empty boat. There was no one to blame. There was no target for his rage. The anger simply dissolved into the mist on the river. Zhuangzi's profound lesson is this: every boat that collides with you on the river of life is an empty boat. The person who criticizes you at work, the family member who misunderstands you, the stranger who is rude to you online, they are all empty boats. From our limited perspective, we see them as solid, malicious actors, intentionally directing their actions at us. But from a wiser perspective, we can see that they are simply adrift, carried along by the invisible currents of their own conditioning. Their actions are not born from a solid, stable center of malice, but from their own unexamined pain, their own fears, their own insecurities, their own inner storms. The critical words they speak are often a reflection of their own self-criticism. The blame they project is often a manifestation of their own unresolved guilt. They are not acting. They are reacting, just as we once did, on autopilot. When you can truly see this, when you can look at the person who is causing you pain and see the empty, adrift, and suffering boat behind their angry words, a miracle happens. The anger inside you finds no target. There is no one to be angry at. And, like the man on the river, your rage simply, quietly, and effortlessly dissolves. This does not mean we become passive doormats. It means we learn to respond with wisdom instead of reacting with anger. When we have cultivated a strong inner compass through self-forgiveness and a clear understanding of our own intentions, we are no longer desperately seeking validation from the outside world. We are not dependent on the praise of others to feel worthy, and therefore, the blame of others cannot so easily diminish us. Their opinions become what they are, just opinions. They are pieces of information, not declarations of truth. The wise approach to criticism, then, is like that of a gold prospector panning in a river. The prospector scoops up a pan full of riverbed material. Most of it is worthless mud, sand, and gravel. With a gentle, skillful motion, they let this wash away. This is the other person's anger, their projections, their misunderstandings. We do not need to hold on to it or fight with it. We simply let it go. But the wise prospector keeps a keen eye on the bottom of the pan, because sometimes, amidst all the mud, there may be a tiny gleaming fleck of gold. There may be a grain of truth in the criticism that we can learn from. Perhaps our communication was unclear. Perhaps we were a bit careless. The humble person, the person who is like a mountain and not a fragile leaf, has the strength and stability to look for that fleck of gold, to pick it up, and to use it to grow. They can take what is useful from the criticism and discard the rest, all without taking any of it personally. This is the art of meeting the world with an unshakable core of inner peace. It is the ability to stand firm in your own sense of worth and purpose, while remaining open and teachable. It is the wisdom to see every encounter not as a potential battle to be won or lost, but as an opportunity to practice this profound shift in perspective, from seeing a world full of malicious enemies to seeing a world full of other empty boats, each one struggling, just like us, to navigate the often misty river of life. This perspective makes personal anger feel not only unnecessary, but obsolete. It melts the armor of our defensive ego and clears the ground for a far more powerful and intelligent response to the world. For if we are no longer reacting to the other boats with judgment and rage, what is the alternative? What is the energy that can look upon another struggling, conditioned, and suffering being and respond with skill and grace? The answer is not cold indifference. It is the active, engaged, and healing warmth of compassion. In the inner landscape of the mind, judgment is a barren and arid desert. It withers everything it touches, leaving us isolated and brittle, both from ourselves and from others. If we are to find an oasis in this desert, a source of genuine healing and connection, we must cultivate the life-giving waters of compassion. In the Buddhist tradition, this is known as karuna. It is not merely a feeling of pity or sentimentality. Karuna is the active trembling of the heart in the face of suffering. It is the sincere and powerful wish for all beings, including ourselves, to be free from their pain. It is the direct and courageous response of the heart to the wisdom of our interconnectedness. Compassion is the antidote to the poison of judgment, the force that allows us to accept the imperfections of life with grace and strength. The practice of compassion, like all profound inner work, must begin at home, within our own hearts. It begins with self-compassion. For many of us, raised in cultures that prize relentless self-improvement and harsh self-criticism, this is the most difficult step. We cannot hope to pour the healing water of compassion for others from a cup that is empty. We cannot genuinely wish for others to be free from suffering if we are constantly inflicting it upon ourselves with a sharp internal monologue of blame and shame. The practice is simple, yet revolutionary. It is to learn to treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer to a dear friend who was struggling. When a friend makes a mistake, do we berate them and call them a failure? Or do we listen with patience, offer reassurance, and remind them of their inherent goodness? Self-compassion is the act of turning this friendly attitude inward. When you find yourself caught in a moment of failure, of regret, of pain, you can pause. You can place a hand on your own heart and offer yourself the same kind words. This is a moment of suffering. This is difficult. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion that I need. This is not an act of self-pity or of letting yourself off the hook. It is a moment of recognizing your own humanity, of acknowledging that to be human is to be imperfect and to feel pain. It is the foundation upon which all other forms of compassion are built. Once we begin to fill our own cup with self-compassion, we can naturally begin to extend it outward. We can look upon the other empty boats that collide with us on the river of life, not with anger, but with a new understanding. The practice here is to hold in our minds the simple, powerful truth. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. That person who was rude in the grocery line may be grieving a loss. That boss who seems demanding and critical may be under immense pressure from their own life that we cannot see. Their harmful actions, as we have seen, arise from their own complex web of causes and conditions, their own history of pain and ignorance. Judgment requires a solid target, a bad person to blame. But when we see the suffering and confusion that drives another's actions, the solid target dissolves. In its place, we see a fellow being, caught in the grips of their own conditioning, struggling, just like us, to find happiness and avoid pain. Anger becomes a pointless response. The only intelligent and healing response that can arise from this clear seeing is compassion. There is a story that captures this journey, from isolated, personal suffering to vast, universal compassion, more poignantly than any other. It is the story of a woman named Kisa Gautami. She lived in the time of the Buddha, and her entire world revolved around her infant son. When the child suddenly fell ill and died, her grief was so immense that it drove her mad. She refused to accept his death, clutching his small, lifeless body to her chest. She wandered through her village, going from house to house, desperately begging for medicine that could bring her son back to life. The villagers, seeing her pitiable state, directed her to the one they believed could perform any miracle, the Buddha. Kisa Gautami ran to the Buddha, laid her son at his feet, and pleaded with him for a cure. The Buddha looked upon her with infinite tenderness, and instead of dismissing her impossible request, he gave her a task. "There is only one medicine that can help," he said. "Go into the village and bring me back a single mustard seed from a house where no one has ever lost a child, a parent, a spouse, or a friend." Clinging to this fragile sliver of hope, she began her quest. At the first house, a kind woman immediately offered her a handful of mustard seeds. But when Kisagotami asked her crucial question, the woman's face fell. "The seeds you can have," she said sadly, "but in this house, I lost my husband." Kisagotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. "We have plenty of seeds, but here, we buried our father. Here, my sister passed away. In our family, we have known many deaths." As the sun began to set, Kisagotami had gone to every house in the village and had not found a single one untouched by the pain of loss. The profound truth of her situation began to dawn on her, not as an idea, but as a deep, visceral understanding. She was not alone in her suffering. Her pain, which had felt so personal, so isolating, so unjust, was in fact the universal sorrow of all humanity. Every person she had spoken to shared her grief in some form. Her heart, which had been clenched tight around her own personal tragedy, began to soften and open. Her personal grief merged with the great ocean of human suffering, and in that merging, it was transformed into compassion. She understood. She went to the forest, gently laid her son to rest, and returned to the Buddha, not as a desperate mother, but as a woman who had awakened to a profound truth. This story teaches us that compassion is born from the wisdom of interconnectedness. It is the understanding that our suffering is not a solitary confinement, but a shared experience that links us to all beings. This is why compassion is not a weakness. It is not a sentimental or passive state. It is a form of immense strength and courage. It takes courage to be willing to feel pain, whether our own or that of another, without shutting down, without turning away, without erecting a wall of blame or indifference. Compassion is the strength to keep your heart open in hell. It is the logical, emotional, and powerful response to truly understanding that we are not separate. The suffering of another is, in a very real sense, a part of our own experience. The desire to see them free from that suffering is the most natural and wholesome impulse in the universe. It is enlightened self-interest. Karuna, then, is the active, engaged, and healing force that arises when wisdom and love meet in the heart. It is the ultimate antidote to the cold poison of judgment. It is what allows us to look at our own imperfect past with kindness. It is what allows us to look at the other struggling beings around us with understanding. It is the foundation for a life of meaning, connection, and true emotional courage. We have now gathered the essential tools for this inner journey: the acceptance of our past, the wisdom to see things as they are, and the compassion to hold it all with a gentle heart. Now, we must take this entire toolkit and apply it to one of the most challenging and pressure-filled arenas of modern life, the world of work and career. How can we navigate our professional lives not as a frantic race to be won, but as a meaningful path to be walked? For many of us in the modern world, the question of "what do you do?" has become synonymous with the question, "who are you?" Our career is not just how we earn a living. It has become the primary stage upon which we seek our identity, our sense of worth, and our social standing. It is a vast and competitive arena, rife with unspoken rules and immense pressures. We are encouraged from a young age to choose the right path, to climb a predetermined ladder of success, and to measure our progress against our peers. This relentless focus on achievement turns our professional lives into a major source of anxiety, a breeding ground for feelings of inadequacy, regret over wrong turns, and a constant, nagging fear of being left behind. But what if this entire model is based on a flawed metaphor? What if we could learn to see our career not as a frantic race to be won, but as a meaningful path to be walked? The conventional view of a career is that of a racetrack. It is a linear path with a clear direction, forward and up. There are competitors on all sides, and the primary goal is speed to get ahead, to reach the next milestone faster than everyone else. In this model, success is measured by external markers, promotions, salary increases, prestigious titles, and the corner office. Any deviation from this forward momentum is seen as a failure. A layoff is a catastrophic crash. Taking time off to raise a family or explore a personal interest is seen as falling hopelessly behind. Choosing a path with less prestige but more personal meaning is viewed as losing the race. The dominant emotions of the racetrack mentality are anxiety, competition, and a constant, stressful striving. You are perpetually running toward a finish line of happiness that seems to recede as you approach it. Now, consider a different metaphor, the labyrinth, an ancient and sacred symbol. The labyrinth is not a maze designed to trick or confuse you. A maze has multiple entrances, dead ends, and the possibility of getting hopelessly lost. A labyrinth has only one, single, universal path. Though it twists and turns, if you simply keep walking, it will inevitably lead you to the center. From a limited vantage point on the path, it can sometimes feel like you are moving in the wrong direction, away from your goal. The path may take you to the outermost edge, just when you feel you are getting close. But every single turn, every seemingly backward step, is a necessary and integral part of the journey. The purpose of a labyrinth is not to get to the center as quickly as possible. The purpose is to walk the path with awareness, to trust the journey, and to discover what the path itself has to teach you. The center is not a pot of gold or a trophy, but a place of deeper self-knowledge, integration, and inner peace. When we apply this labyrinthine wisdom to our career, everything changes. A setback, like being laid off, is no longer a crash. It is simply a sharp, unexpected turn on the path. It might be the very turn that leads you to discover a talent you never knew you had, or to find a professional community that is far more aligned with your true values. A voluntary step back, choosing a less demanding job to have more time for family or health, is not a sign of losing. It is a conscious choice to walk a part of the path that leads you closer to the center of well-being. A project that fails is not a dead end. It is a turn that provides a crucial, unforgettable lesson that will be essential for navigating a future part of the path. The most creative, resilient, and ultimately fulfilling careers are rarely straight lines. They are filled with these labyrinthine twists, these supposed detours that, when looked upon in retrospect, were the most meaningful and transformative parts of the entire journey. A powerful modern parable for this is the story of Steve Jobs. In 1985, he was publicly and humiliatingly fired from Apple, the very company he had co-founded, in his parents' garage. By all the standards of the racetrack model, this was an epic failure. He had been lapped, thrown from the race entirely. He would later say that he felt he had let a previous generation of entrepreneurs down, that he had fumbled the baton. For a time, he was lost. But in his famous 2005 commencement address at Stanford University, he reflected on this event with a startlingly different perspective. He said, "I didn't see it then, But it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. He explained that the crushing heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. This newfound freedom allowed him to enter what would become one of the most fertile and creative periods of his life. He founded Next, a company that developed groundbreaking software, and he funded a small computer graphics company called Pixar. The lessons learned, the technologies developed, and the creative resilience forged during this exile were the very things that made his eventual return to a struggling Apple so spectacularly successful. The labyrinthine path he was forced to walk, which at the time looked like a move away from his life center, was precisely what led him to his greatest achievements. His story is a testament to the fact that we cannot possibly judge the wisdom of the path while we are still walking it. Ultimately, the most profound liberation comes from untangling our sense of self from our professional role. We live in a culture that encourages a dangerous fusion of identity and occupation. We say, "I am a doctor," or "I am an artist." This is a fragile foundation upon which to build a life. If you are your job, what happens when you lose your job? If your worth is determined by your productivity and your title, what happens when you retire or become ill? You experience a kind of death, a collapse of self. The wisdom of non-attachment, rooted in the Buddhist understanding of anatta, or no solid self, offers a healthier way. It reminds us that doctor, artist, or manager are temporary roles we play, functions we perform. They are not the totality of our being. We are a vast, mysterious, and ever-changing consciousness. A job is something we do, not something we are. The invitation is to ground our identity in something far more stable and authentic, in our intrinsic human qualities. You can cultivate an identity as someone who is kind, as someone who is curious, as a devoted parent, as a loyal friend, as a lifelong learner. When your sense of worth is rooted in these internal, unconditional qualities, the inevitable storms of the professional world cannot capsize you. You can perform your job with passion and excellence, but you hold the role lightly. It does not define you. So let us lay down the metaphor of the frantic racetrack. Let us instead embrace the image of the sacred labyrinth. Let us learn to trust the winding path, to see every mistake as a potential lesson, every setback as a sacred detour. Let us find our worth not on a business card or a pay stub, but in the quality of our presence and the kindness of our heart. This approach drains our professional life of its feverish anxiety and infuses it with a sense of purpose, adventure, and profound peace. The immense pressure we place on our careers is perhaps rivaled by only one other domain in our modern lives: our romantic relationships. We often search for the perfect partner with the same desperate, goal-oriented energy that we search for the perfect job, and we judge our failures in love with an equally unforgiving harshness. It is time now to turn the lens of this wisdom toward the intimate, challenging, and beautiful labyrinth of human connection. Just as we project our hopes for a perfect career onto the world, we project our deepest longings for wholeness and happiness onto our relationships. In our culture, we are raised on a steady diet of stories about the one, the perfect soulmate, the flawless partner who will complete us, understand us perfectly, and live with us in a state of perpetual, conflict-free bliss. We scroll through social media feeds that present a curated gallery of perfect couples on perfect vacations, reinforcing an impossible ideal. This search for a flawless connection, this belief in a happily ever after devoid of any struggle, is one of the greatest sources of suffering in modern life. It sets us up for a devastating cycle of idealization, disappointment, and the painful feeling of having failed at the crucial human endeavor of love. But the wisdom traditions offer us a different story, a more realistic and ultimately more hopeful vision of what it means to truly connect with another human being. The expectation of a perfect, frictionless relationship is the first and greatest mistake. It is a fantasy that ensures disappointment because it asks another flawed, imperfect human being to carry the impossible burden of our own salvation. When we enter a relationship with this ideal in mind, every disagreement feels like a catastrophe. Every annoying habit, every moment of misunderstanding, every time our partner fails to read our mind becomes evidence that we have chosen the wrong person, or that the relationship itself is fundamentally broken. This is not love. It is a continuous audition where the other person is constantly being judged against an imaginary, perfect script. The truth is, the search for a perfect other is often an ego-driven quest to fix our own sense of inner lack. We believe another person can heal our wounds and make us whole, a process that is, and always will be, an inside job. A more skillful and liberating perspective is to see every relationship not as a destination of perfect happiness, but as a teacher, a practice ground for wisdom and compassion. Our most intimate partners are spouses, our close friends, our family members are not meant to be perfect reflections of our own desires. They are meant to be mirrors. Because we allow them so close, they inevitably reflect back to us everything we have not yet healed in ourselves. They reveal our own insecurities. They trigger our deepest fears. They expose our habitual patterns of anger, withdrawal, or blame. A conflict, from this point of view, is not a sign of failure. It is the curriculum. A disagreement over finances is a lesson in communication and fear. A moment of jealousy is a lesson in attachment and self-worth. An argument born from a simple misunderstanding becomes a powerful opportunity to practice everything we have been exploring, to notice our own second arrows, to listen with the intention to understand rather than to win, and to practice the difficult but healing art of forgiveness. The purpose of a deep relationship is not to avoid all conflict, but to learn how to navigate that conflict with a growing sense of awareness, kindness, and mutual respect. In Japan, there is a beautiful and profound art form called kintsugi. When a cherished piece of ceramic potteria bowl, a cup, a vase is broken, it is not discarded. To do so would be to see the break as a final failure. Instead, the broken pieces are meticulously gathered and painstakingly glued back together using a special lacquer that is mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. The philosophy of kintsugi is not to hide the damage, but to illuminate it. The cracks are not seen as shameful flaws to be concealed, but as an essential and beautiful part of the object's history. The lines of gold trace the story of the object's journey, a testament to the fact that it was loved, that it was broken, and that it was cared for enough to be put back together. A kintsugi bowl is considered more beautiful, more precious, and stronger than it was before it was broken. This is perhaps the most perfect metaphor for a real, lasting human relationship. We do not enter relationships as pristine, unbroken vessels. We come with our own histories, our own cracks, our own past hurts, and in the course of a shared life, new breaks will inevitably occur. There will be disagreements, misunderstandings, moments where we fail each other. The conventional, disposable view of relationships says that when a thing is broken, you should throw it away and get a new one. The wisdom of kintsugi love says otherwise. It invites us to see the break as an opportunity. The hard work of honest communication, the willingness to be vulnerable, the act of forgiveness, this is the lacquer that holds the pieces together. The compassion, the acceptance, and the love we bring to this process of repair, this is the gold that makes the bond not only whole again, but more beautiful and resilient than before. A long-term love is not a flawless diamond. It is a magnificent work of kintsugi art, its value found in the beautiful, golden scars of its shared history. This leads to the heart of the matter. To truly love another person is to love the real, not the ideal. It is to let go of the fantasy, the perfect image you projected onto them in the dizzying early days of romance, and to embrace the complex, flawed, and sometimes difficult human being who stands before you. It is to see their strengths and their weaknesses, their light and their shadow, and to make space in your heart for all of it, just as you are learning to make space for all of it within yourself. This love also respects the law of impermanence. The person you love today will not be the same person in 10 years, and neither will you. To cling to a relationship as it was in the past is to deny the living, breathing, evolving nature of both people. True love allows for growth, for change, for the unexpected unfolding of two intertwined lives. Sometimes, this means that paths diverge and relationships end. And even then, to accept this ending with grace, without framing it as a personal failure, is a profound act of love for both yourself and the other person. Ultimately then, the practice of love is the practice of letting go of perfection. It is the art of seeing the cracks not as flaws, but as opportunities for gold. It is about choosing connection over fantasy and learning the sacred art of repair over and over again. We have now looked at how we can accept our own flaws, our own mistakes, and the imperfections in our careers and our relationships. But all of this discussion rests on one final, foundational assumption: the assumption that there is a solid, continuous self who is making these choices and committing these errors. To find the deepest and most unshakable freedom from the burdens of the past, we must now turn the light of awareness onto this very self. We must dare to ask the most radical question of all: who or what is this self that I take to be me? We have now journeyed through the outer and inner landscapes of our experience. We have examined our relationship with our choices, our past, our career, and our connections with others. At every turn, we have found that the path to peace lies in letting go of rigid expectations, of judgment, of the need to be right. We now arrive at the final and most fundamental object of our clinging. It is the very foundation upon which the entire edifice of regret and anxiety is built. It is our sense of I. We have spoken at length about accepting my mistakes, forgiving myself, and understanding my path. But to find the most profound and unshakable freedom, we must dare to ask the deepest question of all: who or what is this I? What is this self that I take to be me? The answer offered by Buddhist philosophy is the most radical, the most challenging, and ultimately the most liberating of all its teachings. It is the wisdom of anatta, or no self. This does not mean that you do not exist. You are clearly here, hearing these words, breathing, thinking, feeling. The teaching of no self is not a nihilistic denial of our existence. It is a denial of the kind of existence we imagine we have. We instinctively feel that somewhere inside our body and mind, there is a permanent, separate, and unchanging Korea CEO, a soul, an essence that is the real me. This I is the one who owns our thoughts, feels our feelings, and makes our decisions. The Buddha, through his own deep investigation, discovered that upon close examination, no such entity can be found. Instead, what we call a self is actually a dynamic and impersonal process. It is a temporary gathering of 5 distinct, ever-changing elements, known as the 5 aggregates or skandhas. The first is the aggregate of form, our physical body, which is in a constant state of flux. Billions of our cells are dying and being replaced every day. The body you have now is not the same body you had 7 years ago. The second is feeling, the endless stream of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral sensations that flow through us, sparked by contact with the world. The third is perception, the mental faculty that recognizes and labels sensory input that is a tree. This is a sad feeling. The fourth, and a very important one, is mental formations. This includes all our thoughts, our moods, our opinions, our prejudices, our habits, and crucially, our intentions or volitions. The fifth is consciousness, the basic faculty of awareness that knows the other 4 aggregates are present. Take a moment and look for the you believe yourself to be. Is it your body? But your body is changing and will one day decay. Is it your feelings? They are as fleeting as the weather. Is it your thoughts? They arise and vanish without your command. Is it your memories? They are unreliable and fade over time. The more closely you look, the more you realize that you are not a thing, but a verb. You are not a noun, but an event. You are the dynamic, flowing, and interdependent process of these 5 aggregates arising and ceasing, moment by moment by moment. There is no permanent CEO in the head office. There is only the bustling, ever-changing activity of the government itself. A helpful metaphor is that of a wave on the ocean. A wave has a clear identity for a time. It has a shape, a size, a beginning, and an end. We can point to it and say, there is a wave. But is that wave in any way separate from the ocean? Number? It is simply a temporary form that the ocean has taken. It is made of water, just like the rest of the ocean. Its existence is entirely dependent on the ocean. When the wave crashes on the shore, does it die? To number. It simply returns to its true nature, which it never left. We are like that wave. Our individual self, our ego, is the temporary form we take. We feel separate, distinct, and because of this feeling of separation, we become terrified of our own death, our own dissolution, forgetting that our true nature is as vast and indestructible as the entire ocean of existence. This also helps us understand our sense of continuity. We feel like the same person we were yesterday, even though we know we have changed. Think of one candle lighting another. Is the flame on the second candle the same as the flame on the first? No, the wick and the wax are entirely different. Is it a completely different flame? No, because its existence is a direct continuation of the first. It is neither the same nor different. It is a conditioned process. The you of today is a continuation of the you of yesterday. The process is linked by cause and effect, by memory and habit, but it is not the identical entity. You are not the same man who steps in the river twice. Herein lies the ultimate liberation from regret. If the you of today is not the same person who made that mistake 5, 10, or 20 years ago, why do you continue to punish yourself for it? That past self, that specific configuration of the 5 aggregates, has completely ceased to exist. It is as gone as last year's winter snow. All that remains is a memory, a story in the mind of the present self. To cling to guilt and regret for the actions of that past self is to hold yourself accountable for the actions of a ghost. You are willingly being haunted by a phantom of your own creation. When you truly see this, not just as an idea but as a felt reality, the chains of the past lose their power. The burden of being a self is immense. A solid, separate self needs to be protected, defended, and enhanced. We spend our lives polishing this fragile identity, defending its reputation, hiding its flaws, and broadcasting its accomplishments. It is an exhausting and never-ending project. When we see through the illusion of this separate self, the whole project can be abandoned. The need to be right dissolves, because the I who could be right is seen as a fluid process. The fear of failure diminishes, because the I who could fail is understood to be a temporary wave, not the whole ocean. The heavy weight of personal history, my story, my trauma, my mistakes becomes lighter. It is no longer a personal indictment, but simply the story of a process that has unfolded, a river that has flowed. We shift from being the tormented main character trapped in the drama of our life to being the compassionate, spacious awareness that is witnessing the entire play unfold. This teaching of anatta is not something to be feared. It is not an annihilation of who you are. It is an expansion into what you truly are. It is the discovery that you are not the small, isolated, and fragile wave, but the entire, boundless, and indestructible ocean. It is the final and most profound letting go. It is the ultimate key that unlocks the deepest prison of all, the prison of the separate self. When we finally stop the exhausting project of defending and defining this illusory self, when we let go of our frantic clinging to its past and our anxious planning for its future, a profound quietness descends. We are left with a simple, uncomplicated presence. And in this presence, we can finally discover what it means to be truly content with what is, having journeyed to the very core of the self and seen it not as a solid thing, but as a fluid process. A profound sense of peace can begin to dawn. When the exhausting, lifelong project of defending and promoting a fragile ego is finally abandoned, what is left? The answer is a simple, uncomplicated presence. Yet, even here, a deep and powerful habit of the modern mind can persist. It is the habit of dissatisfaction, the restless feeling of not enough, the quiet but constant hum of a life that is perpetually incomplete. Our entire consumer culture is built upon this feeling. It is an engine that runs on the fuel of our own discontent, constantly whispering that our happiness lies just on the other side of the next purchase, the next achievement, the next relationship, the next experience. This manifests in our minds as a when, then formula for living. When I get that promotion, then I will feel secure. When I finally lose the weight, then I will love my body. When I pay off my mortgage, then I can finally relax. Happiness is always held at arm's length, a conditional prize to be awarded in a future that never quite arrives. Because as soon as we achieve one goal, the mind, in its habitual restlessness, immediately sets another. The goalposts for happiness are constantly moving. This is the very definition of the hedonic treadmiller state, of perpetually running toward a joy that our own striving keeps just out of reach. Contentment is the radical act of stepping off this treadmill. It is the courageous and countercultural choice to find peace and well-being right where we are, not in some idealized future. It is essential to understand that contentment is not the same as complacency or passivity. This is a common fear, especially in achievement-oriented societies. We worry that if we become content, we will lose our drive, become lazy, and cease to grow. But this is a misunderstanding. Complacency is a form of apathy born from fear or laziness. Contentment is a form of peace born from wisdom. Imagine two people on a pilgrimage to a distant, beautiful mountain. The first person is driven by anxious striving. He hates the path he is on, complains about the heat and the dust, ignores the scenery around him, and thinks only of reaching the summit. His entire journey is an exercise in misery, his well-being completely dependent on arriving at his destination. The second person is also walking toward the same mountain. The goal provides her with a direction and a purpose, but she is not at war with the journey. She feels the warmth of the sun on her skin. She notices the beauty of the wildflowers beside the path. She appreciates the simple rhythm of her own walking. She is content with the process. Both are moving forward, but only one is at peace. Contentment is not about giving up on the mountain. It is about learning to enjoy the walk. You can still have goals and aspirations, but your happiness is no longer held hostage by their attainment. There is a timeless story that captures this distinction perfectly. A powerful and immensely wealthy king, adorned in silk and jewels, went to visit a wise sage. He found the sage sitting peacefully on a riverbank, wearing nothing but a simple cloth, smiling at the gentle flow of the water. The king, feeling the need to assert his own importance, began to describe his ambitious plans. "First," he said, "I am finishing my new grand palace. Then, I will raise a great army and conquer the neighboring kingdom to the north." The sage listened patiently and then asked, "And then what?" The king, slightly taken aback, continued, "Then, I will use their resources to build a mighty navy and sail across the great ocean to conquer the lands beyond." Again, the sage asked quietly, "And then what?" Growing more animated, the king declared, "Then, I will consolidate my power and become the undisputed ruler of the entire world, with all its treasures at my command." The sage offered the same simple question, "And then what?" The king, finally exasperated, threw up his hands and said, Then, I will have it all. I will finally be able to retire from my labors, to sit quietly by a river, and to enjoy a life of simple peace." The wise sage looked at the king, a gentle smile playing on his lips, and said softly, "I am doing that right now." This story reveals the profound irony at the heart of our endless striving. We so often sacrifice our present peace, health, and relationships in the pursuit of a future state of contentment that is available to us in every single moment. The king believes that peace is a prize to be won at the end of a long and bloody campaign. The sage understands that peace is a choice to be made in the present. The practical path to cultivating this state of being, to becoming more like the sage and less like the king, is the practice of gratitude. Our minds are naturally wired with a negativity bias. For our ancestors' survival, it was far more important to notice the one tiger in the bushes than the 99 beautiful flowers. This ancient wiring persists today. We tend to fixate on what is wrong, what is missing, what is broken in our lives, while taking for granted the vast ocean of things that are right. Gratitude is the conscious and deliberate practice of counteracting this bias. It is the act of intentionally shifting the spotlight of our attention from what we lack to what we have. This is not about naive positive thinking or ignoring the real problems in our lives. It is about seeing the whole picture. It is a simple but profound rebalancing of our perspective. The practice can be as simple as taking 60 seconds at the start or end of your day to mentally name 3 things you are genuinely grateful for. It could be something as vast as the love of your family, or as simple as the taste of your morning coffee, the comfort of your bed, the feeling of your own breath moving in and out of your body. These things are so constant that they become invisible to us. Gratitude makes them visible again. It is a practice of wanting what you already have. It is waking up to the quiet miracles that are already present in your life. The miracles we so often overlook in our frantic race to acquire new ones. Contentment, then, is the quiet joy that arises when we cease our war with the present moment. It is the peace that comes from the realization that we already have enough, that we already are enough. It is the freedom from the exhausting belief that our happiness is contingent on some future event. It is a radical shift from a mindset of lack to a mindset of abundancy and abundance that has nothing to do with what we own and everything to do with how we attend to what is already here. But this feeling of lack or abundance is not a direct response to the facts of our life. It is a response to the story we tell ourselves about those facts. A person with very little can feel abundant because their story is one of gratitude, while a person with a great deal can feel a constant sense of lack because their story is one of endless, unfulfilled desire. To truly master the art of contentment, we must become the conscious authors of our own inner narrative. We must learn to see the stories we tell ourselves and to choose a story that leads not to suffering, but to freedom. The human mind is, above all else, a storyteller. We do not experience life as a stream of raw, disconnected data. Instead, our minds instinctively and relentlessly weave every sensation, every event, every encounter into a coherent narrative. This narrative-making function is essential. It is how we create meaning, how we understand our place in the world, and how we construct our own identity. We are the protagonist in an epic film that is constantly being written, directed, and produced inside our own heads. The problem is not that we tell stories. The problem is that we forget we are the storytellers. We become so engrossed in the film that we believe it is reality itself, and we become utterly captivated by the fate of its main character, me. For many of us, the default genre of this inner film is tragedy, or perhaps a drama filled with struggle. The central theme is often one of inadequacy and error. We develop a core narrative, a personal myth that we then use to interpret all the events of our life. It might be the story of the person who never gets a break, where every setback is seen as further proof that the universe is against us. It might be the story of the one who is not good enough, where every success is dismissed as luck, and every mistake is magnified as evidence of our inherent flaws. Or it might be the story of the person who always chooses wrong, where we look back at the path of our life and see only a long series of regrettable forks in the road. Once these narratives take hold, they become powerful, self-fulfilling prophecies. If your core story is, "I am unlovable," you may unconsciously act in ways that push people away, thereby proving your story true. If your story is, "I am a failure," you will interpret ambiguous outcomes as failures and may be too afraid to take the risks necessary for success. We become trapped in the feedback loop of a story we wrote ourselves, forgetting that we hold the pen. This is where the practice of mindfulness becomes the essential tool of the storyteller. Without mindfulness, we are lost in the story. We are the character, feeling every blow, completely identified with the plot's dramatic twists and turns. The story feels like an absolute, objective truth. Mindfulness allows us to take a step back. It allows us to shift from being the actor in the film to being the one sitting in the director's chair, watching the film on the screen. With mindful awareness, we can begin to see the thoughts that make up the story as thoughts. The familiar line, "I always mess things up," arises, and instead of being consumed by it, we can simply note, there is the thought that I always mess things up. An old story is playing. This simple act of seeing the thought as a transient mental event, rather than as a factual report on reality, is profoundly liberating. It creates a space between us and the story. And in that space, we discover our freedom. We realize that the story is not written in stone. It is a mental habit, a well-worn groove in the brain, but it is not our destiny. We can choose to stop reading it, and we can choose to write a new one. There is a simple, powerful parable that illustrates this shift from being a victim of our story to being the author of our reality. Two small frogs accidentally fall into a deep vat of fresh cream. They immediately begin to paddle, but they can find no solid ground. The sides of the vat are steep and slippery, and it seems impossible to escape. The first frog quickly writes its story. The narrative is certain death. It thinks, this is hopeless. There is no way out. I am doomed. Believing this story to be the final, inarguable truth, its actions align with its narrative. It stops kicking. It gives up, and it sinks to the bottom, drowning in the cream. Its tragic story becomes its reality. The second frog is in the exact same predicament. It is just as terrified, and the initial thought, this is hopeless, also flashes through its mind. But it chooses a different story. Its story is not one of a guaranteed outcome, but one of present moment action. Its narrative is simply, I don't know what will happen, but the only thing I can do right now is kick. It does not have a grand, optimistic plan. It simply abandons the story of the future and focuses on the story of the present. And so, it kicks and kicks and kicks. Its legs grow tired, but it sticks to its simple story. Just keep kicking. Its constant, desperate motion begins to churn the cream. Slowly, miraculously, the liquid begins to thicken. It continues to kick, and the cream becomes firmer, until it is a solid pad of butter, finding itself on solid ground. The second frog takes one final leap and hops out of the vat to freedom. It did not escape because it was stronger or luckier. It escaped because it chose a better story, a story of action over despair, and it lived out that story until its reality was transformed. We all have this power to consciously reauthor the narrative of our own lives. This is not about engaging in toxic positivity or pretending that painful things did not happen. The events of our past are the raw material. They cannot be changed. But the meaning we give those events, the theme of our story, is entirely up to us. We can take the exact same set of life events and write a tragedy, or we can write an epic of resilience. The story of my life is a tragic series of mistakes, can be consciously rewritten as, my life has been a challenging and educational journey that has forged my strength. The narrative of, I failed in my career, can be transformed into, my professional path has given me a diverse and unique set of experiences. The victim's story of, my difficult childhood ruined me, can become the hero's story of, overcoming the adversities of my childhood has given me a deep capacity for empathy and courage. The facts remain the same. The protagonist's relationship to those facts is what changes everything. This is the ultimate act of taking responsibility for our own experience. In every moment, we are telling ourselves a story. We can be the unconscious character, tossed about by a plot we feel we cannot control. Or we can be the conscious author, infusing our journey with meaning, purpose, and compassion. The power to define your experience, to choose the lens through which you view your own life, is one of the greatest and most intimate freedoms you will ever possess. It is the freedom to decide that your past mistakes are not evidence of your failure, but chapters in your own personal epic of learning and growth. As we become more skillful at writing our own story, we might find that the old categories of hero and villain, success and failure, right and wrong, begin to feel too simple, too confining. What if it were possible to write a story that transcends these dualities altogether? What if we could find a freedom that lies beyond the very concepts of right and wrong? We have spent much of our journey together exploring the nature of suffering and the path to its cessation. We have looked at regret, at the stories we tell ourselves about our past, and the ways in which we cling to idealized versions of what our lives could have been. Now, we must go deeper, to the very root of this particular form of human anguish. We must examine the very architecture of the mind that creates the concepts of a right path and a wrong path in the first place. This suffering, the kind that our friend Jacob from our opening story embodies, the gnawing feeling that we have made a catastrophic error in the script of our lives, arises from a fundamental habit of the mind, the habit of dualistic thinking. True freedom, the most profound liberation, is not found in finally managing to make all the right choices. It is found in transcending the very anxiety of right and wrong itself. It is the discovery of a vast open space of awareness, where we are no longer prisoners of our own judgment. The human mind, for practical evolutionary reasons, is a magnificent sorting machine. It categorizes the world into pairs of opposites to help us navigate reality. Hot and cold, light and dark, safe and dangerous. This function is essential for our survival. The problem arises when this binary lens is applied to the infinitely complex, nuanced, and interconnected tapestry of human life. Our minds create endless pairs of opposites and demand that we choose a side. We have good and bad, success and failure, sacred and profane, and perhaps the most powerful and insidious of all, right and wrong. Once these categories are established as real, solid, and separate, they become the bedrock of our inner world and the source of immense, self-inflicted suffering. We construct our entire sense of self-worth around these judgments. We look back at our lives through this harsh filter. This career move was a success. That one was a failure. This relationship was the right one. That one was the wrong one. I should have taken that job. I shouldn't have moved to that city. Our past is no longer a series of experiences, but a courtroom drama in which we are both the defendant and the merciless judge, endlessly prosecuting ourselves for perceived crimes. This internal courtroom drama is exhausting. It drains our energy and colors our present moments with the bitterness of the past. Moreover, it projects a terrifying anxiety onto the future. Because we believe so strongly in the reality of right and wrong paths, we become paralyzed by the fear of making another mistake. We research endlessly. We seek constant advice. We second-guess every decision, hoping to find a guaranteed map to a future free of regret. But such a map does not exist. And so we live in a state of perpetual, low-grade anxiety, believing that one wrong turn could lead to a lifetime of unhappiness. This is the very essence of the second arrow we have spoken of. The first arrow is the event itself, the job loss, the breakup, the difficult outcome. The second arrow, the one that causes the real and lasting wound, is our judgment about it. This was a failure. I made the wrong choice. I am flawed. This self-flagellation is the engine of our discontent. So how do we escape this prison of our own making? The Buddhist path offers a profound insight, a form of wisdom it calls prajna. Prajna is not simply knowledge. It is a clear, penetrating, seeing that cuts through the illusions created by the mind. Prajna looks at these rigid categories of right and wrong, success and failure, and it does not see solid, independent realities. It sees through them to their fundamental nature, which is described by the term sunyata, or emptiness. This is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in all of Eastern philosophy. Emptiness does not mean nothingness, or that things do not exist. It means that things are empty of a fixed, separate, independent essence. They are relational, contextual, and impermanent. A failure, for example, is not a solid entity. It is a label we attach to a set of circumstances. That very same set of circumstances, seen from a different perspective or from 10 years in the future, might be relabeled the most important lesson of my life, or a necessary redirection that led to something beautiful. The event itself was empty of failure. We projected that quality onto it from our limited point of view. The same is true for a wrong decision. A choice is made based on the information and awareness we have at a particular moment. The labels of right or wrong are applied only in hindsight, based on a chain of causes and effects that were utterly unpredictable at the time. The choice itself was not born with the quality of wrongness embedded within it. This insight is incredibly liberating. It begins to drain the venom from our past regrets. It allows us to see our past, not as a series of errors, but as a series of causes that have led us, inexorably, to the present moment. This understanding is beautifully captured in a line from the Sufi poet Rumi, whose wisdom often resonates with the deepest truths of Zen. He wrote, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. This is not a physical place. It is a state of consciousness. It is the vast, open, non-judgmental awareness that exists prior to the mind's categorization. In this field, things are allowed to simply be what they are. A thought is just a thought. A feeling is just a feeling. A past action is just a past action. In this field, we can finally lay down the heavy burden of our own judgment. To live from this field is the essence of true freedom. It is not about becoming so perfect that we never make a mistake. It is about realizing that the concepts of mistake and perfection are themselves part of the illusion. True freedom is the ability to act from a place of clear awareness in the present, and then to accept the outcome with equanimity, no matter what it is. It is the ability to embrace every twist and turn of our life's path, knowing that every single step, especially the ones that felt like missteps, was a necessary part of the journey. The wrong turn that led us into the dark woods was also the path that taught us courage and resilience. The failed relationship that broke our heart was also the path that taught us the depths of our own capacity to love and to heal. From the perspective of this field, there are no wrong paths. There is only the path, your path. This realization dissolves the paralysis of the future and the regret of the past, allowing us to finally be present for the only moment we ever truly have. This one. But how then do we learn to live in this field, to make it our home? Having explored the possibility of a mind free from the tyranny of right and wrong, we arrive at the most practical and perhaps most challenging question of all. How do we live this understanding day to day? How do we take this profound wisdom and integrate it into the messy, complicated, and often frustrating reality of our actual lives? There is a pervasive fantasy in the spiritual world, a myth of over there. We believe that true peace, true practice, true liberation happens somewhere else. It happens in a monastery high in the Himalayas, on a 10-day silent retreat, or in a future life where we are free from our mortgage, our difficult job, and our family responsibilities. We believe our current life is just a messy dress rehearsal, an obstacle course we must endure before our real spiritual life can begin. This belief, however well-intentioned, is a subtle form of resistance. It is a rejection of the only life we actually have. And as we have seen, resistance is the root of suffering. The most courageous step on the spiritual path is to abandon the myth of over there and to embrace the radical truth that the path is not somewhere else. The path is here. Your life, in all its imperfect glory, is not the obstacle to the path. Your life is the path. You do not need to travel to a monastery to practice. Your entire life is your monastery, your dojo, your meditation hall. The traffic jam you are stuck in is not an annoying delay preventing you from getting to your destination. It is a perfect, enclosed laboratory for the practice of patience. Can you feel the anger rising in your chest, the tension in your jaw, the frantic story in your mind about being late? And can you meet it all with a calm, spacious awareness? The difficult colleague at work, or the challenging family member who knows exactly how to push your buttons, is not just a source of irritation. They are your greatest teacher, a living koan presented to you by the universe. They are a mirror reflecting your own triggers, your judgments, your areas of attachment. Can you interact with them while remaining grounded in your own center? Can you offer a moment of compassion instead of a knee-jerk reaction? The mountain of laundry, the crying child, the demanding boss, these are not distractions from your spiritual practice. They are the very substance of it. To wash the dishes with your full attention is a more advanced practice than sitting on a cushion while dreaming of enlightenment. To respond to a child's needs with kindness when you are tired and stressed is an act of supreme compassion. Your life is not preparing you for something else. This is it. This is the curriculum. Every moment of discomfort, every flicker of irritation, every pang of regret that arises is a bell of awakening. It is an invitation. Life is constantly tapping us on the shoulder, whispering, "Here." Here is an opportunity to wake up. When the familiar story of a past failure surfaces, it is not a sign that you are broken. It is a gentle reminder, an invitation to practice what we have just learned. It is a chance to see the thought as just a thought, to feel the emotion in your body without being consumed by it, and to let it pass without adding the second arrow of self-judgment. When someone cuts you off on the highway, that flash of anger is an invitation to pause, to breathe, and to choose freedom over reactivity. Each of these small, seemingly insignificant moments is a workout in the gymnasium of the mind. Each time we choose to respond with awareness rather than react with habit, we strengthen our capacity for peace, resilience, and wisdom. We stop waiting for life to stop challenging us and instead learn to use the challenges as fuel for our transformation. This means we must let go of the search for a perfect map from an external source. We live in a culture obsessed with plans, with 5-step programs and guaranteed guides to happiness. We want someone to give us the map and tell us we are on the right track. But in the realm of the spirit, no such map exists. The path is pathless. The most potent metaphor for this way of living is that of a person walking through a vast, uncharted forest. There is no pre-existing trail to follow. The path is created by the very act of walking. Each step you take brings a new perspective, a new view. You place your foot down, you observe your surroundings, and from that place of present moment awareness, you take the next step. To worry about whether you took a wrong turn 10 steps ago is useless. It only distracts you from the landscape that is right in front of you now. In a pathless land, there are no wrong turns, only turns. There is no right way to go, only the way you are going. So how do we navigate without a map? We use our inner compass, and the needle of that compass is our own present moment awareness. Instead of asking, "Am I on the right path?" we ask, "Am I walking with awareness right now?" Instead of worrying about the destination, we attend to the quality of our step. Is this step, this action, this word, coming from a place of clarity, kindness, and courage? This is the only guidance we need. Your life is the curriculum. The situations it presents are the lessons, and you are both the student and the teacher. You are the student because you are here to learn from your experiences, and you are the teacher because only you, through the power of your own awareness, can interpret the lessons and decide how to integrate them. This is the ultimate act of taking radical responsibility for your own life and your own awakening. We cease to be victims of a pre-written script and become the conscious authors of our own unfolding story. This journey has taken us from the pain of believing we are on the wrong path to the liberation of knowing our life is the path. Now, all that is left is to gather these threads one last time. We began this journey together with the image of Jacob's burden, a heavy, invisible weight carried by so many of us in this modern world. It is the suffering that comes from a core belief that life is a grand cosmic test, and that somewhere along the way we have failed. We believed we had taken a wrong turn, chosen the wrong path, and were now living a flawed version of the life that was meant for us. Our journey has been a deep re-examination of this belief. We traveled through the landscape of our own minds, learning to see karma not as a rigid fate, but as the liberating power of our present actions. We saw the invisible threads of dependent origination that connect all things, dissolving the illusion that we are an isolated self, failing in a vacuum. We learned to stop building our house on the shifting banks of the river of impermanence. Most importantly, we learned about the second arrow and how to stop adding the poison of our own judgment to the inevitable wounds of life, transforming every experience into a part of our curriculum. The ultimate message, the core truth we have arrived at, is this: the profound peace you are seeking is not hidden in a hypothetical life where you made no mistakes. It is not waiting for you in the past. If only you could turn back time and choose a different door. That peace is available to you right here, in this moment, in your ability to fully and compassionately accept the path you have walked, the path you are walking now, and the path that is yet to unfold. It is the radical acceptance that in the grand curriculum of your life, there are no mistakes, only lessons. Destiny is not a script that was written for you by an unseen hand. It is a story that you are actively writing with the ink of your own choices, your own awareness, in every single moment. You are the author of your own meaning, and so, we leave you not with a command, but with a question, and a sense of your own innate power. The next time the echo of regret arises in your mind, the next time that old story of what if begins to play, instead of being swept away by its current, you are invited to do something different. Pause. Take one conscious breath, feeling the air fill your lungs, and then, gently, kindly, ask yourself, what is the lesson here? What is this path, this very experience, trying to teach me? This simple inquiry shifts you from the role of a victim of the past to a conscious student in the present. Peace is not a destination at the end of the path. It is the way you walk the path, and you have the complete and sovereign power to choose how you walk, starting right now.